The ground still holds evidence capable of reshaping long-held assumptions about humanity's earliest achievements. Towering stone complexes, finely crafted artifacts, and engineering feats preserved for thousands of years continue to challenge conventional interpretation through their precision, scale, and purpose. Each discovery adds another piece to a story that remains incomplete despite decades of research. Carved deep into the rolling hills of Zhejiang province in eastern China, the Longyou caves reveal a world that feels both deliberate and unexpectedly silent. Descending through a narrow entrance, the daylight quickly fades, replaced by immense stone chambers stretching into the bedrock. Towering walls rise from still pools of water, while every exposed surface bears carefully cut, parallel chisel marks that sweep across ceilings, pillars, and walls with remarkable consistency. The vast interior is geometric, orderly, and unmistakably shaped by human hands, yet the purpose behind these enormous spaces remains uncertain. For centuries, the chambers remained concealed beneath water-filled ponds that local communities accepted as natural features. Then, in 1992, villagers decided to drain one of the ponds. As the water slowly disappeared, an enormous underground hall emerged. Further exploration revealed that this was not an isolated chamber, but part of an extensive complex. More than 24 massive caverns were eventually identified, each excavated directly into solid siltstone and covering thousands of square feet. The engineering immediately attracted attention. Massive stone pillars had been left standing to support the ceilings, while walls and ceilings displayed the same distinctive pattern of evenly spaced tool marks. The builders appeared to have followed a carefully planned design rather than expanding the chambers randomly. Every angle suggested calculation, stability, and long-term intention. Archaeologists generally believe the caves date back more than 2,000 years, possibly to the late Warring States period or the early Han Dynasty. Yet, this conclusion raises difficult questions. No historical records clearly describe a project of such extraordinary scale. Ancient Chinese chronicles often documented canals, palaces, tombs, and military works with remarkable detail, making the apparent absence of any written reference especially noteworthy. The sheer volume of excavated rock adds another layer of uncertainty. Estimates suggest that nearly 1 million cubic meters of stone may have been removed to create the chambers. Such an undertaking would have required an immense labor force, careful organization, and years of coordinated effort. Where was all of the excavated material taken? No nearby deposits large enough to account for it have been confidently identified. Several explanations have been proposed. Some researchers suggest the caves served as underground quarries whose extracted stone supplied nearby construction projects. Others argue they may have been ceremonial spaces, military shelters, storage facilities, or even reservoirs connected to sophisticated water management systems. Each theory explains certain features while leaving others unresolved. Beyond conventional interpretations, more speculative ideas occasionally emerge. Some have suggested the chambers represent the work of an advanced engineering tradition whose achievements were later overlooked or forgotten by written history. Others see symbolic meaning in the consistent patterns carved into every surface, proposing that the markings were intended for purposes extending beyond simple excavation. These ideas remain outside the archaeological consensus, yet they continue to attract attention because so many practical questions remain unanswered. Walking through the immense halls today, it is difficult not to notice the extraordinary precision that defines every surface. The repeating grooves transform bare stone into something almost architectural, creating a rhythm that draws the eye toward distant pillars disappearing into shadow. The chambers feel neither accidental nor unfinished. They convey intention, planning, and purpose, even if that purpose has faded from memory. Perhaps future discoveries will reveal documents, tools, or nearby settlements capable of placing the Longyou caves firmly within the historical record. Until then, these vast underground chambers remain one of archaeology's most enduring puzzles, inviting each generation to reconsider how much of humanity's past may still lie waiting beneath the surface. Yet the Longyou caves are far from the only place where immense stonework continues to challenge straightforward explanation. Thousands of miles away, another site presents an equally compelling puzzle. Not beneath quiet waters, but along the sunlit slopes of the Beka Valley, where some of the largest stones ever moved by human hands still inspire careful debate. Near the modern city of Baalbek in present-day Lebanon, an immense limestone quarry stretches across the landscape. At first glance, it appears like many other ancient quarries, its exposed rock faces marked by centuries of extraction. But deeper within the site lies something extraordinary. Resting partially separated from the surrounding bedrock are colossal stone blocks whose sheer dimensions seem almost beyond comprehension. They were carefully carved with straight edges and remarkably flat surfaces, yet they were never transported to their intended destination. Among these are the famous Trilithon quarry blocks, closely associated with the monumental platform supporting the Roman Temple of Jupiter at Baalbek. 3 enormous stones, each weighing an estimated 800 tons, form part of the temple's foundation. Nearby in the quarry itself rests an even larger unfinished block commonly known as the Stone of the Pregnant Woman, estimated to weigh around 1,000 tons. More recent excavations uncovered another partially buried monolith that may exceed 1,600 tons, making it one of the largest worked stones ever identified from antiquity. Standing beside these monoliths, ordinary measures of scale quickly lose meaning. The blocks stretch longer than many modern buses and rise taller than a person. Their surfaces preserve clear evidence of deliberate shaping, while narrow channels around their edges reveal the methods used to separate them from the living rock. Every detail confirms that experienced stoneworkers carefully planned the extraction. The greater mystery lies not in whether they could shape the stone, but how they intended to move it. Mainstream archaeology attributes much of Baalbek's monumental construction to the Roman period, particularly during the 1st century BC and 1st century AD. Roman engineers possessed sophisticated knowledge of cranes, levers, rollers, sledges, and coordinated labor. Throughout the empire, they transported massive columns and stone blocks over considerable distances, demonstrating engineering skills that remain impressive even today. Yet, Baalbek occupies a unique position within that history. The stones incorporated into the temple platform are significantly larger than those commonly used in other Roman projects. Their exceptional size has encouraged researchers to ask whether Roman builders simply pushed existing engineering techniques to extraordinary limits, or whether they inherited foundations that had already been prepared by an earlier culture. Some scholars suggest that portions of the massive platform may predate Roman construction. According to this view, Roman architects could have incorporated earlier megalithic foundations into their ambitious temple complex, expanding and adapting what they found. Supporters point to differences in masonry styles between certain lower foundation courses and the structures built above them. Others argue that the available archaeological evidence still favors a Roman date for the principal construction phases, emphasizing the continuity of architectural techniques found throughout the site. The practical questions remain equally compelling. How many workers would have been required to move stones weighing hundreds of tons? What combination of timber, ropes, sledges, ramps, and carefully prepared roads could have supported such immense loads? Could seasonal conditions, lubricated pathways or temporary earthen embankments have reduced the effort. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that surprisingly large objects can be transported using relatively simple technologies when enough planning and manpower are available. Even so, scaling those methods to stones approaching or exceeding 1,000 tons remains an extraordinary engineering challenge. The unfinished monoliths resting in the quarry offer valuable clues. Their abandonment suggests that ancient builders encountered practical limitations, despite their remarkable abilities. Perhaps flaws developed within the stone before extraction was complete. Perhaps construction priorities changed, political circumstances shifted, or the immense effort required simply outweighed the benefits. The unfinished blocks preserve a rare snapshot of an ambitious project frozen in time. Beyond academic discussions, Baalbek has naturally attracted more speculative interpretations. Some writers have proposed that the platform belonged to an advanced prehistoric culture, possessing engineering capabilities no longer understood. From the colossal stone blocks of Baalbek, our journey now leads to a monument of a very different scale. Here, the mystery is measured not by immense weight or towering architecture, but by a single carved surface that has inspired centuries of curiosity. Its silence offers few answers, yet its unusual form continues to invite careful examination. High in the Andean landscape of southern Peru, not far from the shores of Lake Titicaca, a solitary rock face rises from the surrounding terrain. At first glance, it appears unremarkable, blending naturally into the weathered hills that have overlooked this region for thousands of years. But as one approaches, an unmistakably geometric shape emerges from the stone. Carefully carved into the cliff is what resembles a doorway, complete with a recessed frame and a smaller niche positioned at its center. Yet, unlike any ordinary entrance, this doorway opens onto solid rock. Known today as Aramu Muru, or Hayu Marca, the monument measures roughly 7 meters tall and 7 meters wide. The central niche is large enough for a person to stand within comfortably, while the surrounding frame creates the unmistakable illusion of a monumental portal. There is no chamber beyond it, no tunnel extending into the mountainside, and no visible indication that excavation was ever intended to continue deeper. Instead, the feature ends abruptly against untouched stone. Its simplicity is precisely what makes it so compelling. Archaeologists generally associate the site with the broader cultural traditions that flourished around Lake Titicaca before the arrival of the Inca Empire. Although assigning a precise date remains difficult, many researchers believe it may have been created by pre-Inca peoples who occupied the region centuries before Spanish chroniclers recorded its existence. Similar ceremonial carvings have been identified elsewhere in the Andes, suggesting that Aramu Muru may belong to a wider architectural tradition rather than representing an isolated creation. Even so, its exact purpose remains uncertain. Unlike temples filled with inscriptions or ceremonial objects, Aramu Muru offers almost no direct evidence explaining why it was carved. There are no surviving written records describing its construction, no detailed reliefs illustrating rituals, and no archaeological discoveries that conclusively identify its original function. The monument communicates almost entirely through its form, leaving interpretation open to careful debate. One widely accepted possibility is that the doorway held ceremonial significance. Throughout the Andes, natural rock formations frequently carried spiritual importance, serving as sacred places where communities gathered for rituals connected to ancestors, mountains, or the forces of nature. Rather than functioning as a physical entrance, the carved portal may have symbolized passage between different realms of existence, a visual representation of transition rather than transportation. The smaller niche at the center has attracted particular attention. Some researchers suggest it may once have held offerings, ritual objects, or symbolic items placed during ceremonies. Others propose that participants stood within the niche itself while conducting religious observances, transforming the carved doorway into a ceremonial stage framed by the surrounding landscape. Local traditions have added another layer to the site's enduring reputation. One well-known legend tells of an Inca priest named Aramu Muru, who fled Spanish conquistadors carrying a sacred golden object. According to the story, he reached the stone doorway, placed the object into a small recess, and somehow passed through the rock itself before disappearing forever. While historians regard this account as later folklore rather than documented history, it demonstrates how deeply the monument became woven into regional storytelling. During the 20th century, Aramu Muru began attracting wider international attention. Travelers, writers, and alternative researchers proposed increasingly imaginative explanations for the unusual carving. Some described it as a gateway built by an unknown advanced culture. Others suggested astronomical alignments, forgotten technologies, or symbolic connections extending far beyond the Andes. A few even argued that the doorway represented a literal portal to another dimension. These interpretations remain outside mainstream archaeology, largely because they are unsupported by physical evidence. No excavations have uncovered mechanisms concealed within the rock, nor have surveys revealed hidden chambers behind the carved facade. Geological studies indicate that the formation consists of solid stone extending well beyond the visible surface. Yet, dismissing speculative ideas entirely does not eliminate the deeper archaeological question. If the monument was intended solely as a symbolic doorway, why was this particular design chosen? Why carve such a convincing entrance that leads nowhere? Why invest considerable effort into shaping a feature whose significance could only be understood within a cultural framework now largely lost? Its location may provide subtle clues. The surrounding region is filled with archaeological sites connected to ceremonial life, including temples, processional routes, and sacred landscapes centered on Lake Titicaca, one of the highest navigable lakes on Earth. Mountains, water, and unusual rock formations often played central roles in Andean belief systems. Within that context, Aramu Muru may have formed part of a much larger sacred geography whose full meaning has yet to be reconstructed. Standing before the monument today, visitors often remark on the remarkable precision of its proportions. The doorway appears inviting despite leading nowhere. The polished surfaces contrast with the rough natural cliff surrounding them, creating the impression that the mountain itself was intentionally transformed into an architectural statement. It is an object that seems complete despite revealing almost nothing about its original purpose. Perhaps future excavations nearby will uncover ceremonial artifacts capable of placing the monument within a clearer historical context. Perhaps advances in archaeological research will reveal new connections between Aramu Muru and other sacred sites scattered throughout the Andes. Or perhaps its greatest significance lies not in what stands before us, but in the beliefs and traditions that have long since faded, leaving only a silent stone doorway that continues to invite one enduring question: what exactly was its builder's intended destination? If Aramu Muru leaves us contemplating a doorway that opens onto solid stone, our next destination invites us to step through an entrance that descends into an entire world concealed beneath the earth. Here, the mystery is not defined by a single monument, but by an underground labyrinth whose earliest origins remain one of archaeology's most intriguing unanswered questions. In the heart of Cappadocia, in central Turkey, the landscape appears almost dreamlike. Soft, volcanic rock has been sculpted by wind and rain into towering cones, steep valleys, and weathered cliffs unlike almost anywhere else on Earth. Beneath this remarkable terrain, however, lies an entirely different landscape. one carved not by nature alone, but by generations of human hands. Hidden below the modern town of Derinkuyu stretches an immense network of tunnels, chambers, stairways, storage rooms, ventilation shafts, and gathering spaces that descend many levels into the bedrock. Standing at the entrance, little suggests the extraordinary complexity concealed below. Narrow passages quickly lead into wider chambers, while staircases disappear into darkness, connecting level after level in a carefully organized system. Massive, circular stone doors, weighing hundreds of pounds, still stand where they could once seal entire corridors from intrusion. Even today, the underground city conveys a remarkable sense of planning, resilience, and permanence. Derinkuyu first attracted widespread archaeological attention after its rediscovery in the 1960s, when a local resident renovating his home uncovered a concealed passage behind a wall. Further exploration revealed one of the largest underground settlements ever identified. More than 18 levels have been documented, extending approximately 85 meters beneath the surface, although researchers believe portions of the complex remain inaccessible or unexplored. The later history of Derinkuyu is relatively well understood. Historical evidence suggests that Byzantine communities expanded and occupied the underground city as a place of refuge during periods of conflict, particularly during raids that threatened settlements across the region. Living quarters, kitchens, wine presses, stables, wells, churches, schools, and sophisticated ventilation systems demonstrate that thousands of people could survive underground for extended periods when necessary. Yet, the deeper one travels into Derinkuyu, the more uncertain its earliest story becomes. Many archaeologists believe that at least the oldest sections of the complex significantly predate the Byzantine expansions. Some researchers suggest the earliest excavations may have begun during the era of the Phrygians, around the 1st millennium BC. Others propose that portions could be even older, gradually enlarged by successive cultures over many centuries. The soft volcanic tuff found throughout Cappadocia made excavation practical while remaining stable enough to support extensive underground construction, encouraging repeated generations to expand existing spaces rather than beginning entirely new projects. This layered development complicates efforts to identify the original builders. Unlike a monument constructed during a single period, Derinkuyu appears to represent centuries of continuous adaptation. Walls were widened, new corridors added, older chambers repurposed, and entire sections interconnected as the underground city evolved. Distinguishing the earliest phase from later modifications is therefore one of archaeology's greatest challenges at the site. The oldest chambers often appear simpler than the elaborate upper levels. Their passages are narrower, their layouts more direct, and their surfaces show fewer architectural refinements. Were these modest rooms the foundation from which the entire labyrinth eventually grew? Or do they represent only a small surviving portion of an even earlier underground complex now buried, collapsed, or still awaiting discovery? One particularly remarkable feature is the sophisticated ventilation system. Vertical shafts extend from deep underground to the surface, supplying fresh air throughout multiple levels. Some also served as wells, allowing access to water without exposing inhabitants above ground. Designing such systems required careful planning and an impressive understanding of airflow long before modern engineering principles were formally documented. Equally impressive are the enormous rolling stone doors positioned throughout the tunnels. Rather than swinging on hinges, these circular stones could be rolled across narrow entrances from inside the complex, effectively sealing passages while allowing defenders to observe approaching intruders through small openings. Their placement reflects a defensive strategy developed through considerable practical experience. Conventional archaeology generally views Derinkuyu as a refuge that expanded gradually in response to changing political and military conditions. Each generation inherited existing tunnels, adapting them to meet new needs while preserving much of the earlier framework. This explanation accounts for the city's remarkable complexity without requiring the work of a single extraordinary civilization. Still, certain questions continue to inspire discussion. How extensive was the earliest underground settlement before later expansions transformed it? What circumstances first motivated people to begin excavating deep into solid rock rather than building exclusively above ground? Were the original chambers intended as temporary shelters, storage facilities, religious spaces, or permanent homes? The archaeological record offers possibilities, but few definitive answers. More speculative interpretations naturally follow. Some writers have suggested that the oldest levels belong to a highly organized society, possessing engineering knowledge far exceeding what is commonly assumed for the period. Others envision a vast prehistoric network linking multiple underground cities scattered throughout Cappadocia, functioning as an interconnected system whose full extent has yet to be mapped. While such proposals remain outside mainstream archaeological consensus, they reflect the extraordinary scale of what survives beneath the surface. Modern surveys continue to reveal previously unknown tunnels and sealed chambers throughout the region. Derinkuyu itself is now understood to be only one component of a much broader landscape containing dozens of underground settlements, many connected by shared architectural techniques and similar defensive features. Every new discovery adds another piece to an already complex historical puzzle, while raising fresh questions about how these subterranean communities developed over time. Descending through the deepest accessible passages, the outside world gradually disappears. Sound becomes muted. Light narrows into carefully illuminated corridors where generations once walked carrying lamps through the darkness. The walls bear the marks of countless tools, each cut representing another moment in a construction project that may have continued for centuries. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not how these chambers were carved, but how much of their earliest story has been erased by the passage of time. Beneath the familiar streets of Derinkuyu, deeper levels may still preserve evidence capable of transforming our understanding of when this underground world truly began, and who first imagined creating an entire community beneath the earth. While Derinkuyu reveals how entire communities once carved refuge beneath the earth, our next destination suggests a very different purpose for underground spaces. Here, darkness may not have been designed for survival alone, but for ceremony, symbolism, and experiences carefully orchestrated by those who understood the profound psychological power of architecture. High in the Andean mountains of Peru, where steep valleys converge beneath snow-capped peaks, lies the ceremonial center of Chavín de Huántar. Positioned at the meeting point of important trade routes, the site flourished between approximately 1200 BC and 400 BC, becoming one of the earliest major religious centers in the Andes. Even today, its monumental stone architecture commands attention. Massive terraces, carefully fitted masonry, broad plazas, and intricately carved sculptures testify to a society capable of remarkable planning and craftsmanship. Yet, the most intriguing part of Chavín does not rise toward the sky. It disappears into the mountain itself. Hidden within the temple complex is an intricate network of narrow corridors, chambers, stairways, and intersecting passageways extending through the massive stone foundations. These enclosed galleries create a labyrinth unlike almost any other in the ancient Americas. Some passages lead to small, windowless rooms. Others suddenly branch into unexpected directions before ending in carefully constructed chambers. Moving through them, one quickly loses any clear sense of orientation. Unlike underground cities such as Derinkuyu, these tunnels were never intended to house large populations. Their confined dimensions suggest a different purpose entirely. Many corridors permit only 1 or 2 people to pass comfortably, forcing movement at a slow, deliberate pace. Light would have been minimal, limited to torches or small oil lamps whose flickering flames would cast shifting shadows against carefully cut stone walls. Archaeologists have spent decades studying the galleries in an effort to understand why they were built. Excavations reveal that the tunnels were incorporated into the original design of the temple rather than added later, indicating that subterranean spaces played a central role in the site's overall function. Far from being hidden service corridors, they appear to have formed an essential component of the ceremonial experience. At the heart of this underground maze stands one of the site's most remarkable features, the Lanzon. This towering granite monolith, standing more than 4 meters high, occupies a chamber deep within the temple's interior. Carved with an elaborate figure combining human, feline, serpent, and bird characteristics, the sculpture represents one of the defining religious symbols of the Chavín culture. Reaching the Lanzon would not have been straightforward. Visitors entering the galleries would have navigated twisting corridors, changing elevations, and confined spaces before arriving in the dimly illuminated chamber where the monument stood. Many researchers believe this carefully controlled journey was intentional. Rather than simply displaying a sacred object, the builders may have designed an experience that gradually separated participants from the familiar world above. The architecture itself contributes to this interpretation. Certain passages narrow dramatically before opening into larger chambers. Changes in ceiling height alter both movement and perception. Some corridors amplify footsteps or voices, while others absorb sound almost completely. Modern acoustic studies have shown that the temple's stone galleries produce distinctive echoes capable of creating unusual auditory effects. Equally impressive is the site's sophisticated hydraulic engineering. Hidden canals channel water beneath portions of the temple, producing controlled flows that may have generated resonant sounds within enclosed chambers. During periods of heavy rainfall, rushing water moving through concealed stone channels could create deep vibrations echoing throughout the galleries. Some archaeologists propose that these carefully engineered sounds formed part of ceremonial rituals, enhancing the emotional impact experienced by participants. Evidence also suggests that sensory experience played an important role in Chavín's religious practices. Artistic representations depict powerful hybrid beings combining characteristics of jaguars, eagles, snakes, and humans. Some researchers believe priests may have used music, darkness, incense, and possibly psychoactive plants to create carefully structured ceremonies designed to reinforce spiritual transformation. The underground galleries, with their confined spaces and carefully controlled environment, would have amplified every aspect of such rituals. Even with these interpretations, many questions remain unresolved. Not every chamber has yielded clear evidence of its function. Some passages appear to connect logically with major ceremonial spaces, while others seem almost deliberately isolated. Why construct such an extensive internal maze when simpler architectural solutions would have been sufficient? Were certain galleries reserved exclusively for priests? Did different routes serve different ceremonial purposes? Or were some sections symbolic rather than practical? More speculative theories have naturally emerged over time. Some writers have suggested that the tunnels conceal undiscovered chambers still sealed behind ancient walls. Others have proposed that the complex encoded astronomical knowledge within its internal layout, or formed part of a much larger ceremonial network extending beyond the visible ruins. These ideas remain unconfirmed, yet they continue to capture attention because the galleries themselves still contain areas that are difficult to investigate fully. Advances in remote sensing and three-dimensional mapping have revealed additional architectural complexity within the temple, demonstrating that Chavín's builders possessed a sophisticated understanding of spatial planning. Every newly documented corridor strengthens appreciation for their engineering skill, while reminding researchers that much of the site's original ceremonial life remains inaccessible through archaeology alone. Walking through the galleries today, it becomes increasingly clear that the experience was never meant to be casual. Every turn limits visibility. Every chamber controls sound and movement. The outside world disappears almost completely, replaced by an environment where stone, darkness, water, and silence combine into something both architectural and deeply symbolic. Perhaps that was always the intention. The builders of Chavín de Huántar did not merely construct a temple. They created a carefully orchestrated journey beneath the surface, where physical space itself became part of ritual. Yet, despite generations of excavation and research, the full meaning of that journey continues to elude certainty, leaving the ancient tunnels to preserve their purpose within the enduring silence of the mountain. From the winding galleries of Chavín de Huántar, where every corridor seems designed to shape perception, we move into a landscape where the mystery is found not underground, but beneath open skies. Here, the questions are carried not by hidden passages, but by silent stone forms whose remarkable precision has endured for centuries. In the lush lowlands of southern Costa Rica, scattered across river valleys, forest clearings, and ancient settlements, lie dozens of carefully carved stone spheres unlike any others in the archaeological record. Some are small enough to be lifted by a single person, while others measure more than 2 meters in diameter and weigh several tons. Resting quietly among the vegetation, they appear almost effortless in their simplicity. Smooth, nearly symmetrical, and strikingly geometric against the irregular landscape surrounding them. Known as the stone spheres of Diquís, these remarkable objects were first brought to wider international attention during the 1930s, when large-scale agricultural development exposed many examples that had remained partially buried for generations. Workers clearing land for banana plantations encountered these perfectly rounded stones, revealing a discovery that immediately challenged expectations. Here were monumental works of craftsmanship created by societies that left behind no written explanation for their purpose. Archaeological research has since connected the spheres to the indigenous cultures of the Diquís Delta, particularly communities that flourished between approximately AD 500 and AD 1500. Most of the spheres were carved from granodiorite, an exceptionally hard igneous rock quarried from locations several kilometers away. Shaping such durable stone into near-perfect spheres would have required extraordinary patience, remarkable skill, and a detailed understanding of stoneworking techniques. Researchers believe the builders likely used repeated hammering with harder stones, followed by careful grinding and polishing to refine the surface. Experimental archaeology has shown that such methods are entirely capable of producing impressive results, although completing even a single large sphere would have demanded months, perhaps years, of sustained labor. Yet craftsmanship alone does not explain their enduring fascination. Many of the spheres were discovered displaced from their original settings, limiting archaeologists' ability to reconstruct how they were originally arranged. Those remaining in relatively undisturbed contexts suggest that some formed carefully planned alignments near important settlements or ceremonial spaces. Others appear to have marked entrances, open plazas, or areas associated with social status and political authority. These patterns have encouraged several mainstream interpretations. Some archaeologists suggest the spheres symbolized prestige, serving as visible demonstrations of leadership and communal organization. Others propose they marked sacred locations or functioned as territorial symbols identifying important centers within the landscape. None of these explanations fully accounts for every known example, leaving room for continued investigation. The remarkable precision of the largest spheres naturally invites further questions. Without metal tools, modern measuring equipment, or mechanical machinery, How did their creators achieve such consistent proportions? Was visual estimation alone sufficient? Or did skilled artisans employ techniques for maintaining symmetry that have not survived in the archaeological record? Small imperfections reveal that the spheres are not mathematically perfect, yet many remain astonishingly close to true spherical form even after centuries of weathering. Over time, more speculative interpretations have emerged. Some writers have suggested astronomical significance, proposing that certain alignments correspond to celestial events or seasonal observations. Others have imagined symbolic maps, navigational markers, or remnants of an engineering tradition whose broader purpose has disappeared. A few have gone much further, attributing the spheres to unknown prehistoric cultures possessing advanced knowledge beyond conventional archaeological understanding. These ideas remain outside the mainstream because supporting evidence is limited. Excavations continue to indicate that the spheres fit within the cultural traditions of the indigenous societies that inhabited the region. Even so, important details surrounding their exact function remain unresolved, ensuring that discussion continues. Today, the stone spheres of Diquís stand as elegant reminders that complexity is not always expressed through towering monuments or intricate carvings. Sometimes it appears in the quiet perfection of a simple geometric form. Whether they marked power, ceremony, identity, or meanings now lost to time, these silent stones continue to preserve a story that has yet to be fully understood, inviting us to consider how much of their original purpose still waits to emerge from the landscapes where they were first placed. From the carefully shaped spheres of Diquís, our exploration now turns to a monument where precision was expressed on an entirely different scale. Instead of smooth geometry standing alone upon the landscape, we encounter immense walls assembled from stone so massive and so precisely joined that they continue to inspire admiration and enduring questions about those who first mastered such extraordinary construction. Overlooking the historic city of Cusco in Peru, the fortress of Sacsayhuamán rises across a broad hillside with commanding views of the surrounding valley. Its most recognizable feature is a series of immense zigzag terraces stretching across the landscape like the teeth of a giant saw. Built from colossal limestone blocks, some weighing well over 100 tons, the walls form one of the greatest achievements of stone masonry in the ancient Americas. Standing before these walls, the scale is immediately overwhelming. Each stone possesses its own unique shape, yet every block fits tightly against its neighbors without mortar. The joints are so remarkably precise that even a thin blade struggles to pass between them. Rather than relying on uniform rectangular blocks, the builders created an intricate puzzle of irregular polygons, each carefully carved to interlock with those surrounding it. Mainstream archaeology attributes the visible construction of Sacsayhuamán primarily to the Inca Empire during the 15th century under the rule of Pachacuti and his successors. Spanish chroniclers described thousands of workers participating in its construction, transporting enormous stones from nearby quarries using ropes, wooden rollers, earthen ramps, and coordinated human effort. These historical accounts, combined with archaeological evidence, strongly support the view that the Incas were responsible for transforming the hill into a monumental ceremonial and defensive complex. Yet, the walls themselves continue to encourage closer examination. Some researchers have noted differences between the immense lower masonry and portions of the smaller stonework found elsewhere at the site. The largest foundation blocks display a level of complexity and precision that differs from later additions and repairs. Could these differences simply reflect varying construction techniques used for different purposes? Or do they represent separate phases of building carried out over generations? The transportation of the largest nesaias presents another fascinating challenge. Many blocks were quarried several kilometers away before being hauled across uneven terrain without the benefit of iron tools, wheeled vehicles for heavy transport, or draft animals capable of pulling such enormous loads. Archaeologists point to the remarkable organizational abilities of the Inca state, whose vast labor system coordinated thousands of workers on ambitious public projects throughout the empire. Experimental studies have demonstrated that surprisingly large stones can indeed be moved through carefully planned teamwork and engineering. Even so, questions remain regarding the exact methods employed for shaping and positioning the largest blocks with such exceptional precision. How were so many irregular surfaces repeatedly tested and adjusted until they fit together almost perfectly? What sequence of carving, lifting, and placement allowed builders to achieve such seamless joints on stones of extraordinary weight? Adding further complexity is the long cultural history of the Cusco region. Archaeological evidence indicates that the hill of Sacsayhuamán was occupied long before the rise of the Inca Empire. Earlier societies lived throughout the surrounding valleys, leaving behind settlements, ceremonial sites, and architectural traditions that gradually evolved over many centuries. Some historians therefore suggest that the Incas may have expanded upon or rebuilt earlier structures already occupying this strategically important location, although the extent of any pre-Inca construction remains the subject of continuing research. Outside mainstream archaeology, more speculative interpretations have flourished for decades. Some writers argue that the largest zigzag walls belong to an unknown culture, possessing engineering techniques no longer understood, later incorporated into the Inca capital. Others propose that lost construction methods, sophisticated stone softening techniques, or forgotten technologies may explain the extraordinary masonry. These ideas remain unsupported by direct archaeological evidence. Yet they continue to attract attention because the walls themselves appear so unlike conventional expectations. Recent archaeological investigations increasingly emphasize the remarkable achievements of indigenous Andean engineers, whose deep understanding of local materials, seismic activity, and structural stability allowed them to create buildings capable of surviving powerful earthquakes that destroyed many later colonial structures. The irregular interlocking stones may not simply reflect artistic preference, but an ingenious solution for constructing resilient architecture in an active seismic region. As sunlight moves across the weathered limestone, each carefully fitted block casts shifting shadows that highlight the astonishing complexity of the masonry. The walls reveal no inscriptions explaining their construction, no detailed records describing every technique, and no definitive answer to every question they inspire. Instead, they stand as enduring evidence of extraordinary skill, inviting each generation to reconsider the capabilities of the people who shaped them. Whether every stone was placed solely by Inca builders, or whether deeper chapters of the site's history still await discovery, the great zigzag walls of Sacsayhuamán continue to remind us that some of humanity's finest achievements are also among its most enduring archaeological puzzles. From the immense zigzag walls of Sacsayhuamán, our journey now crosses the Mediterranean to an island where monumental architecture took a very different form. Here, the mystery is not carved into towering fortifications, but raised upon an enormous stone platform whose design appears strikingly unlike anything else built in prehistoric Europe. On the fertile plains of northern Sardinia, Italy, Monte de' Codi rises gently above the surrounding countryside. At first glance, it resembles a broad earthen mound crowned by weathered stone. But as its shape becomes clearer, an unexpected form emerges. A long ceremonial ramp climbs steadily toward a massive elevated platform, creating a monument whose silhouette bears little resemblance to the circular tombs, standing stones, or temple complexes more commonly associated with prehistoric Europe. The structure appears almost monumental in its simplicity. Built from carefully arranged stone blocks and layers of earth, the platform once supported a sanctuary overlooking the surrounding landscape. The long ascending ramp leads directly to its summit, giving the entire monument an appearance that has fascinated archaeologists ever since its excavation. It is a design so unusual that, even today, Monte Tocodi occupies a category almost entirely of its own. Archaeological evidence indicates that the earliest phase of the monument was constructed around 4000 BC by communities belonging to the Ozieri culture. Several centuries later, the original structure underwent a remarkable transformation. Rather than abandoning the site, its builders deliberately buried much of the earlier monument beneath additional layers of stone and earth, creating a significantly larger platform while preserving the earlier sanctuary within. This second phase demonstrates not only considerable engineering ability, but also a continuing commitment to the site's importance across generations. Excavations have uncovered valuable clues surrounding the monument. Stone altars, carved standing stones, animal bones, ceremonial pottery, and traces of repeated ritual activity suggest that Monte Tocodi served as an important religious center for centuries. The remains of sacrificial offerings indicate that ceremonies involving livestock likely formed part of the site's ceremonial life, while carefully positioned stones hint at symbolic arrangements whose meanings have not survived. Yet, the monument's architectural design continues to raise questions. Unlike the chambered tombs found elsewhere in prehistoric Europe, Monte Tocodi contains no substantial internal burial spaces. Unlike defensive fortifications, it lacks protective walls designed for warfare. Instead, everything about its construction directs movement upward, toward the elevated platform at its summit. Why did its builders invest such enormous effort into raising an artificial hill crowned by a sacred space? What ceremonies unfolded there that justified generations of continued expansion? Its distinctive appearance has often drawn comparisons with stepped temple platforms found in distant regions of the ancient world, particularly Mesopotamia. The similarities are visually striking. An elevated sanctuary reached by a long, ascending ramp, dominating the surrounding landscape through height rather than vertical towers. Some researchers have explored whether broad cultural contacts across the Mediterranean could explain certain architectural influences during the Neolithic period. Others argue that the resemblance is coincidental, reflecting independent solutions developed by different societies responding to similar ceremonial needs rather than direct cultural connections. The archaeological evidence presently favors independent development. Although prehistoric Mediterranean communities maintained long-distance exchange networks involving obsidian, pottery, and other valuable materials, no convincing evidence demonstrates that the builders of Monte Tocodi directly copied architectural traditions from the Near East. Even so, the visual comparison continues to stimulate discussion because the monument remains so unusual within its European setting. Beyond mainstream scholarship, more speculative interpretations have naturally appeared. Some writers have proposed that Monte Tocodi represents the surviving remnant of an advanced prehistoric tradition whose broader architectural achievements have largely disappeared. Others suggest the platform functioned as an astronomical observatory with the ramp and summit aligned to significant celestial events. While certain stones near the monument may possess astronomical significance, definitive evidence supporting such broader interpretations remains limited. One of the site's most intriguing characteristics is its long ceremonial lifespan. Communities repeatedly returned to this location over many centuries, modifying, enlarging, and preserving it instead of constructing an entirely new sanctuary elsewhere. Such continuity suggests that the monument carried profound cultural meaning, even if that meaning can now only be reconstructed through fragments of archaeology. Standing at the foot of the Great Ramp today, the climb toward the summit still feels deliberate and symbolic. Each step follows a path walked by countless people thousands of years ago, ascending toward rituals whose words, beliefs, and ceremonies have long since faded from memory. The weathered stones no longer reveal the voices that once gathered there, yet they continue to preserve the outline of an idea powerful enough to shape an entire landscape. Whether Monte Diquís represents a uniquely Sardinian expression of sacred architecture, or reflects influences whose full story has yet to be uncovered, it remains one of prehistoric Europe's most distinctive monuments. Its elevated platform continues to invite careful study, leaving us to wonder whether future discoveries may finally explain why its builders chose to raise a sanctuary unlike almost any other in the ancient world. From the elevated sanctuary of Monte Diquís, where ritual was expressed through monumental architecture, our journey now shifts to an object far smaller in scale, yet no less compelling. Instead of massive stone platforms reaching towards the sky, we encounter carefully carved faces whose silent expressions have watched over one of humanity's earliest farming communities for thousands of years. On the outskirts of modern Amman, Jordan, lies the Neolithic settlement of Ain Ghazal, one of the largest known villages of the pre-pottery Neolithic period. Around 7,200 BC, long before cities, kingdoms, or written language emerged, this community flourished beside seasonal streams and fertile land. Its inhabitants cultivated crops, raised livestock, and built permanent homes, helping shape a way of life that would transform human history. Excavations at Ain Ghazal have uncovered remarkable evidence of this transition, including homes, tools, figurines, and some of the oldest large-scale human statues ever discovered. Yet, among these extraordinary finds are a small number of carefully carved stone masks, whose purpose remains one of the site's most intriguing mysteries. Unlike decorative ornaments or everyday objects, these masks possess an unmistakable presence. Carved from limestone, they feature broad faces, deeply cut eye openings, prominent noses, and simple mouths. Several display small perforations around their edges, suggesting they may once have been tied to something, or perhaps even worn. Their expressions are neither clearly lifelike nor entirely abstract. Instead, they occupy a space somewhere between representation and symbolism, conveying a quiet intensity that continues to captivate archaeologists. Although only a handful of these masks have been discovered, they stand apart from nearly every other artifact of their period. Their craftsmanship reflects careful planning, while their restrained features suggest that appearance alone was not their primary purpose. Every carved line seems deliberate, yet their meaning remains uncertain. The wider archaeological context provides important clues. Ain Ghazal has become famous for its extraordinary ritual discoveries, particularly life-sized plaster statues that were intentionally buried after periods of ceremonial use. These carefully modeled human figures, some with 2 pairs of eyes, indicate that the community invested significant effort in symbolic practices extending beyond daily survival. Ancestor veneration, communal ceremonies, and ritual gatherings appear to have played important roles within this early farming society. Within this setting, the stone masks may have served ceremonial functions connected to identity, memory, or spiritual belief. Some archaeologists propose they represented ancestors whose presence remained important long after death. Others suggest they were worn during rituals that reinforced social traditions or marked significant events within the community. The perforations along several masks support the possibility that they were attached to the face, mounted on wooden figures, or secured within ceremonial displays. Yet certainty remains elusive. Unlike later civilizations that left written records describing religious practices, the people of Ain Ghazal communicated entirely without writing. Their beliefs survive only through architecture, burials, and carefully crafted objects whose meanings must be reconstructed from archaeological evidence alone. Every interpretation therefore remains provisional, shaped by comparison rather than direct testimony. One particularly intriguing aspect is the unusual appearance of the eyes. The openings are often enlarged beyond natural proportions, drawing immediate attention to the gaze rather than the rest of the face. Was this purely artistic convention, or did enlarged eyes symbolize awareness, protection, or communication with unseen forces? Similar emphasis on the eyes appears in several plaster statues from the settlement, suggesting that vision itself may have held symbolic importance within the community's worldview. More speculative interpretations have naturally followed. Some researchers outside mainstream archaeology have proposed that the masks represent supernatural beings remembered in oral tradition, while others view them as evidence of sophisticated ritual systems whose complexity exceeded earlier assumptions about Neolithic societies. A few have even suggested connections with symbolic traditions found in distant regions, arguing that shared visual motifs hint at broader cultural exchanges during the early development of agriculture. These ideas remain difficult to verify. Archaeological evidence strongly supports the view that the masks emerged from the cultural traditions of the people who lived at Ain Ghazal, yet their precise function remains unresolved. Their rarity only deepens the puzzle. If they played a central role in ritual life, why have so few examples survived? Were most made from perishable materials now lost to time, or were stone masks reserved for only the most significant ceremonies? Today, these carved faces continue to hold their quiet expressions much as they did thousands of years ago. Their creators left no inscriptions explaining their purpose, no myths describing the ceremonies in which they appeared, and no written voices to accompany their enduring gaze. They remain among the earliest symbolic portraits ever created, inviting us to look back toward the dawn of settled human life and consider how much of its spiritual world still lies beyond our understanding. From the carved faces of Ain Ghazal, where human identity was captured in carefully shaped stone, our exploration now moves to a landscape where entire figures stand beneath the open sky. Here, the monuments are larger, more isolated, and even more difficult to explain, scattered across a remote valley where silence has guarded their story for countless generations. Deep within central Sulawesi, Indonesia, the Bada Valley stretches between forested mountains, its fertile plains framed by steep ridges and winding rivers. The scenery is peaceful, almost untouched, giving little indication that it holds one of Southeast Asia's most remarkable archaeological landscapes. Rising unexpectedly from grassy fields are towering granite sculptures unlike any others found in the region. Some stand upright like silent sentinels, while others rest partially buried, their weathered faces still visible after centuries of exposure. Known collectively as the Bada Valley Megaliths, these stone monuments vary greatly in size and appearance. Some depict stylized human figures with oversized heads, deeply carved eyes, simplified limbs, and folded hands resting against the body. Others appear almost abstract, with only faint suggestions of facial features emerging from the granite. Nearby, large cylindrical stone vats, known as kalamba, often accompanied by heavy circular lids, add another layer of complexity to the landscape. The first challenge facing archaeologists is establishing exactly when these monuments were created. Unlike sites associated with written records or well-documented civilizations, the Bada Valley offers few chronological anchors. Radiocarbon dating from nearby archaeological contexts suggests that megalithic activity in the region likely occurred sometime between the 1st millennium BC and the 2nd millennium AD. However, the statues themselves remain difficult to date directly, leaving considerable uncertainty about their precise age. Equally uncertain is the identity of their creators. No surviving inscriptions identify the people responsible for carving these monuments, and local oral traditions, while rich and meaningful, describe events that blend cultural memory with legend. As a result, archaeologists rely primarily on comparisons with regional megalithic traditions, excavation of surrounding sites, and careful study of the monuments themselves. The craftsmanship immediately raises important questions. Many statues were carved from massive blocks of granite, one of the hardest natural stones available. Shaping such material using prehistoric tools would have required remarkable patience, planning, and technical skill. Transporting these heavy stones across uneven terrain presents an equally intriguing problem. Some monuments stand far from obvious quarry sources, suggesting that considerable communal effort was invested long before carving even began. The human figures themselves display unusual proportions that distinguish them from more naturalistic sculpture. Broad shoulders, oversized heads, large circular eyes, and simplified anatomy give the statues an unmistakably symbolic appearance. Rather than attempting realistic portraiture, their creators emphasized particular features while reducing others to simple geometric forms. What did these figures represent? One widely accepted interpretation suggests they commemorated respected ancestors or important community leaders. Throughout many parts of island Southeast Asia, stone monuments played significant roles in honoring lineage, reinforcing social identity, and maintaining connections between the living and the dead. Within this framework, the statues may have served as enduring markers of memory, preserving the presence of influential individuals within the landscape. The nearby Kalamba have generated additional discussion. These enormous carved stone vessels have often been interpreted as burial containers, ceremonial basins, or repositories for ritual offerings. Excavations have revealed human remains and associated artifacts in some examples, supporting their connection with mortuary practices. Yet, not every Kalamba appears to have served the same purpose, suggesting that their functions may have varied across different communities and periods. As with many remarkable archaeological sites, more speculative ideas have gradually emerged. Some writers have proposed that the statues encode astronomical knowledge or represent forgotten deities whose names disappeared long ago. Others have suggested links to an unknown megalithic tradition extending across distant parts of the Indonesian archipelago. While such proposals remain outside mainstream archaeological consensus, they reflect the difficulty of explaining monuments whose cultural context has only partially survived. Modern archaeological research increasingly emphasizes that the Bada Valley should not be viewed in isolation. Similar megalithic traditions appear elsewhere in Sulawesi, indicating that the valley formed part of a broader cultural landscape rather than an isolated phenomenon. Even so, the distinctive style of its sculptures remains unique, resisting simple comparison with neighboring sites. Walking through the valley today, the statues seem less like abandoned relics than enduring witnesses to a society whose beliefs have largely faded from historical memory. Their weathered faces continue to overlook the fields, unchanged by centuries of rain, sunlight, and passing generations. They neither explain themselves nor reveal the ceremonies they once accompanied. Instead, they remain silent participants in a story that archaeology is only beginning to reconstruct, leaving us to wonder whether the greatest discoveries in the Bada Valley are the monuments already standing in plain sight, or the chapters of their history that still lie waiting beneath the soil. From the silent granite figures of the Bada Valley, our journey now moves to another landscape, where stone preserves the imagination of ancient communities. This time, the mystery is not found in towering monuments or carved human forms, but across a vast desert plain where thousands of images cover volcanic rocks, creating one of the largest collections of rock art in South America. In the dry valleys of southern Peru, near the modern region of Arequipa, lies Toro Muerto, a vast archaeological site scattered across a rugged desert landscape. Under the intense Andean sun, countless volcanic stones rest across the terrain, their dark surfaces contrasting sharply with the pale earth surrounding them. Etched into these rocks are thousands of petroglyphs depicting humans, animals, plants, geometric shapes, and symbolic figures whose meanings remain only partially understood. Unlike monumental structures built to dominate the landscape, Toro Muerto reveals itself gradually. A visitor, walking among the stones, encounters one carving after another, each preserving traces of a distant artistic tradition. Some figures appear carefully planned, while others seem almost abstract, their forms shaped by repeated impacts against the hardened volcanic surface. Together, they create a remarkable visual record left by communities that once traveled through this region. Archaeological research places the creation of many Toro Muerto petroglyphs within the period between approximately 500 BC and AD 1500, with significant activity associated with cultures that developed in the valleys of southern Peru. Among the groups connected to the region were societies influenced by the Quarry and later local traditions that used rock art as part of their cultural expression. However, determining exactly who carved each image and when remains a complex challenge. The environment itself offers important clues. Toro Muerto lies in a region where water sources and fertile valleys created valuable areas for settlement and agriculture. The nearby Mages Valley supported communities that depended on careful management of the landscape, and the petroglyphs may have formed part of a broader relationship between people, nature, and sacred geography. The images carved into the stones provide glimpses into this worldview. Many depict dancers or human figures with raised arms, suggesting movement, ceremony, or communal gatherings. Animals such as camelids, birds, and feline-like creatures appear repeatedly, reflecting species that held practical and symbolic importance throughout Andean societies. Some geometric designs remain more difficult to interpret, raising questions about whether they represented abstract ideas, territorial markers, or elements of ritual practice. One of the greatest mysteries surrounding Toro Muerto is the sheer number of carvings. Thousands of individual images spread across the site, yet there is no definitive explanation for why this particular location became such an important center of artistic activity. Was it a ceremonial gathering place where generations returned to create new images? Did certain stones hold special significance because of their natural shape, position, or relationship with the surrounding mountains? Mainstream archaeology generally views the site as a long-term cultural landscape, rather than the work of a single civilization. Different communities may have added their own carvings over centuries, gradually transforming the area into a visual archive of changing beliefs and traditions. The variety of styles supports the idea that Toro Muerto remained meaningful for multiple generations. Yet, the lack of written records leaves many interpretations open. Some researchers have explored whether certain arrangements of images corresponded with astronomical observations or seasonal cycles. Others have suggested that some figures may represent mythological beings connected to Andean cosmology. While these possibilities remain difficult to prove, they reflect the broader challenge of interpreting symbolic art created by societies whose written explanations no longer exist. More speculative theories have also emerged, proposing that the site preserves knowledge from a much older tradition or represents a form of communication whose meaning has been entirely lost. These ideas remain outside accepted archaeological understanding, but the enduring uncertainty surrounding some carvings continues to encourage discussion and further investigation. Modern technology is now allowing researchers to examine Toro Muerto in greater detail. Digital mapping, aerial surveys, and advanced imaging techniques are helping document thousands of carvings while revealing patterns that may have been difficult to recognize from the ground. Each new analysis adds information, yet the central questions remain. Walking among the weathered stones of Toro Muerto, the experience is one of standing before a conversation interrupted by time. The carvings preserve movement, belief, and imagination, but the voices that created them have long disappeared. The desert still holds their images beneath the endless Andean sky, leaving us to wonder how many meanings remain encoded within these ancient marks, and what stories the stones may still have waiting to reveal. From the vast desert stones of Toro Muerto, where ancient hands transformed volcanic surfaces into a gallery of symbols, our exploration now moves toward a landscape where stone itself became a representation of the human imagination. Deep in the mountains of Colombia, enormous carved figures stand among forests and valleys, preserving the beliefs of a society whose history remains only partially understood. In the southern highlands of Colombia, within the lush valleys surrounding the modern town of San Agustín, hundreds of monumental stone sculptures emerge from the landscape. Surrounded by rivers, mountains, and fertile terrain, this region contains one of the largest collections of megalithic art in South America. The figures vary dramatically in appearance, some human, some animal-like, and others combining features of both worlds. Their expressions are powerful, their forms imposing, and their purpose continues to inspire careful investigation. The Archaeological Park of San Agustín preserves many of these remarkable sculptures, but the monuments extend far beyond a single location. Spread across hillsides, ceremonial sites, and ancient burial areas, they reveal the work of a sophisticated society that flourished in the region between approximately the 1st millennium BC and the 8th century AD. Although their creators are known today as the San Agustín culture, much about their identity, beliefs, and social organization remains uncertain. Unlike civilizations that left behind written documents, the people of San Agustín communicated through stone. Their sculptures became their lasting record, but interpreting that record is a difficult task. The figures do not explain themselves. They offer symbols, gestures, and forms that must be understood through archaeology, comparison, and careful analysis. Many of the statues are associated with funerary and ceremonial contexts. Archaeologists have discovered them near burial mounds and monumental tombs, suggesting that they played an important role in rituals connected with death, ancestors, and spiritual beliefs. Some sculptures appear to guard entrances to tombs, standing as powerful protectors between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. The artistic style of these monuments is among their most fascinating features. Human figures often display large eyes, prominent teeth, and exaggerated facial expressions. Many hold objects close to their bodies, while others combine human characteristics with those of powerful animals such as jaguars, birds, or reptiles. These hybrid forms appear to represent beings that existed between different realms, possibly reflecting complex ideas about transformation, authority, and the relationship between humans and nature. One of the most remarkable aspects of San Agustín is the scale of the work involved. Some statues reach several meters in height and were carved from volcanic stone weighing many tons. The builders selected, transported, and shaped these massive blocks using stone tools, gradually transforming rough material into detailed symbolic figures. The process required not only technical skill, but also organized labor and shared cultural purpose. Yet, many questions remain unanswered. Who were the individuals represented by these enormous sculptures? Were they ancestors, gods, rulers, mythical beings, or symbolic guardians? Did each figure represent a specific story, or were they part of a broader religious system whose meanings have disappeared over time? Mainstream archaeology suggests that the monuments reflected the beliefs of an agricultural society deeply connected to ritual practices and ancestral traditions. Their placement within burial landscapes indicates that they likely served important spiritual functions, reinforcing connections between communities and their deceased leaders or revered figures. However, the absence of written records has allowed other interpretations to emerge. Some researchers have explored whether the arrangement of certain monuments reflected astronomical knowledge or seasonal observations. Others have suggested that the hybrid creatures represent complex cosmological ideas rather than literal beings. More speculative voices have proposed that the statues preserve memories of forgotten traditions far older than currently recognized, although these interpretations remain unsupported by strong archaeological evidence. Modern studies continue to reveal new details about the San Agustín region. Advanced mapping techniques, excavation, and analysis of surrounding settlements are helping researchers understand how these monuments were created and how they functioned within the wider landscape. Each discovery adds another layer to the story, while also revealing how much remains uncertain. Perhaps the most captivating element of San Agustín is the emotional power of the sculptures themselves. After centuries exposed to rain, sunlight, and changing landscapes, these stone figures still possess a remarkable presence. Their faces continue to watch over the valleys where they were created, preserving the imagination of a society that left no written history, but left behind an extraordinary visual legacy. Standing among these silent monuments today, we are surrounded by questions carved into stone. The people who shaped them are gone, their voices no longer recorded, yet their creations remain. And as research continues, the great statues of San Agustín still invite us to consider what beliefs, stories, and forgotten meanings may remain waiting within the ancient landscape. From the towering stone figures of San Agustín, where ancient communities transformed landscapes into expressions of belief and memory, our journey now moves to a structure defined not by statues or carvings, but by distance itself. Stretching across a vast desert region, this ancient wall follows the contours of the land like a silent line drawn through centuries of human activity, raising questions about its purpose, its builders, and the world that created it. In the remote landscapes of eastern Jordan lies the Khatt Shebib Wall, one of the most intriguing linear structures in the Middle East. Extending for more than 150 kilometers through rocky plains, valleys, and desert terrain, the wall appears from above as a long, winding feature crossing the landscape. Unlike monumental fortresses built to impress, Khatt Shebib is modest in height, often consisting of low stone walls constructed from locally available rocks. Yet its enormous length transforms this simple structure into something remarkable. For generations, the wall remained largely unnoticed from the ground. It blends naturally into its surroundings, appearing almost like a natural boundary between different areas of the desert. Only through aerial surveys, satellite imagery, and modern archaeological investigation did its true scale become apparent. From above, the structure reveals a carefully planned route that stretches across hundreds of kilometers of challenging terrain. The first major questions surrounding Khatt Shebib concern its date and original function. Unlike temples, tombs, or settlements, the wall provides few obvious clues. There are no inscriptions marking its construction, no large buildings attached to it, and limited artifacts that clearly identify the people responsible. As a result, archaeologists have had to rely on field surveys, comparisons with similar structures, and analysis of the surrounding landscape. Current research suggests that Khatt Shebib may have been constructed sometime between the Nabatean period and later historical eras, although its exact age remains uncertain. The region was home to numerous communities that adapted to the harsh desert environment through agriculture, trade, and pastoralism. In such landscapes, controlling movement, protecting resources, and organizing territory could have been essential. One of the most widely accepted interpretations is that the wall functioned as a boundary or land management system rather than a defensive barrier. Its relatively low height would have made it ineffective against organized armies, but it may have helped guide livestock, define areas of use, or protect agricultural zones from wandering animals. Similar stone structures throughout the Middle East demonstrate that ancient communities often modified landscapes in practical ways that are difficult to recognize today. However, the enormous length of Khatt Shebib continues to inspire debate. Why invest such effort into constructing a wall that appears too low for defense and too simple for a monumental boundary? Was its purpose purely practical, or did it also carry social or symbolic meaning? Could the structure have represented ownership, identity, or control over an otherwise open and unpredictable environment? The desert itself provides part of the answer. In regions where water sources, grazing areas, and fertile land were limited, even small changes to the landscape could have significant consequences. A simple line of stones might have served as a powerful statement, separating one area from another and establishing how communities interacted with their surroundings. Archaeologists have also noted that Khatt Shebib is not a perfectly straight construction. Instead, it follows the natural shape of the terrain, moving around hills, descending into valleys, and adapting to the landscape. This suggests that its builders were not attempting to create an abstract geometric line, but rather a structure designed in response to the environment. Along parts of the route, smaller stone structures appear nearby. Some researchers believe these may have been associated with the wall's original function, possibly serving as watch points, shelters, storage areas, or temporary camps for those maintaining the structure. Yet, because the archaeological evidence is limited, their exact relationship with the wall remains uncertain. The mystery surrounding Khatt Shebib has also encouraged more speculative interpretations. Some have compared it to other ancient linear structures around the world, suggesting that it may have been part of a much older tradition of landscape engineering. Others have proposed that such enormous projects reflect forgotten levels of organization among ancient desert societies. These ideas remain debated, as current evidence does not support claims of unknown builders or lost technologies. What makes Khatt Shebib fascinating is not a single unexplained feature, but the challenge of understanding a structure that was never designed to announce itself. It is not a palace, a temple, or a fortress. It is a quiet modification of the land, a human-made line that stretches across a region where survival depended on understanding space, resources, and movement. Modern satellite imagery continues to reveal new details about ancient landscapes that were once impossible to study on such a large scale. Structures like Khatt Shebib demonstrate that the archaeological record is not limited to impressive monuments. Sometimes, the most revealing evidence lies in simple arrangements of stone that quietly shaped how people lived. Walking along the remains of the wall today, the surrounding desert gives little indication of the generations who built, used, and maintained it. The stones remain weathered and scattered, but their root still survives across the landscape. They preserve a fragment of a much larger story, one involving adaptation, organization, and the relationship between humans and their environment. Yet, many questions remain. Who first planned this enormous line across the desert? How many generations contributed to its construction and maintenance? And was Khatt Shebib simply a practical response to daily challenges, Or did it represent something deeper about how ancient communities understood their place within the vast landscapes they inhabited? The answers may still lie somewhere along its silent path, waiting to be uncovered. From the long stone line of Khatt Shebib, where ancient communities reshaped the desert to organize their world, our journey now turns toward a discovery of a very different kind. Here, the mystery is not carved into the landscape, but written onto a fragile sheet of metal, a rare artifact whose words describe something extraordinary, yet whose meaning has remained the subject of intense debate for decades. Hidden within the rugged cliffs overlooking the Dead Sea, near the archaeological site of Qumran, a collection of ancient manuscripts was discovered between 1947 and 1956. These writings, known collectively as the Dead Sea Scrolls, transformed our understanding of Jewish history, religious traditions, and the intellectual world of the Second Temple period. Among hundreds of scroll fragments written on parchment and papyrus, one artifact immediately stood apart from the others. It was not made from animal skin or plant material, it was carved into copper. Known as the Copper Scroll, or 3Q15, this unusual document was discovered in Cave 3 near Qumran in 1952. Unlike the other scrolls found in the region, which primarily contain religious texts, interpretations, prayers, and community writings, the Copper Scroll contains a detailed list of locations and quantities of hidden valuables. Its strange material and practical tone have made it one of the most debated discoveries associated with the Dead Sea Scrolls. The artifact itself is unlike anything else from the collection. Two thin copper sheets were carefully rolled together, creating a scroll that could no longer be opened without risking severe damage. Eventually, researchers made the difficult decision to cut the metal into sections in order to read the engraved text. The process revealed a document written in a form of Hebrew script dating to approximately the 1st century AD. The contents were immediately intriguing. Instead of describing religious teachings or historical events, the Copper Scroll presents a series of instructions referring to concealed treasures. It mentions gold and silver quantities, sacred vessels, and locations where valuable objects were supposedly deposited. The list includes dozens of hiding places spread throughout the region, describing caves, valleys, and underground areas where these riches were said to be stored. But almost immediately, a fundamental question emerged. Were these treasures real? Some researchers believe the Copper Scroll represents an actual inventory of hidden wealth, possibly connected to the temple in Jerusalem before its destruction by the Romans in AD 70. According to this interpretation, religious authorities may have concealed valuable objects during a period of political instability, hoping they could later be recovered. The detailed measurements and locations described in the text appear, at first glance, to resemble practical instructions rather than symbolic writing. Yet, decades of exploration have failed to uncover the vast treasures described in the document. Numerous searches have been conducted at locations mentioned in the Copper Scroll, but no confirmed discoveries of gold, silver, or sacred objects matching its descriptions have been made. This has led some scholars to question whether the text should be understood literally. Another interpretation suggests that the Copper Scroll may not be a treasure map in the traditional sense. Some researchers propose that it could represent a symbolic document connected to religious ideas about sacred wealth. Others argue that the list may have recorded treasures that existed only within a community's traditions, rather than physical objects waiting to be found. The identity of the people who created the Copper Scroll remains another major question. The scroll was found among the Dead Sea Scrolls, but its relationship to the community associated with Qumran is uncertain. Many scholars believe it was deposited in the caves during the same general period as the other manuscripts, yet the document's unique style and subject matter distinguish it from most of the collection. Was it created by the same group that produced the religious texts? Was it brought there from another location? Or was the cave simply used as a hiding place for a document with a completely different origin? The language of the scroll also presents challenges. Its Hebrew differs in certain ways from other texts found at Qumran, reflecting a more practical style focused on lists and measurements rather than theological discussion. The absence of explanations surrounding the locations has made interpretation even more difficult, since the writers appear to have assumed that the original readers already understood the geography. Over time, more speculative theories have emerged. Some have suggested that the copper scroll points toward a lost collection of temple treasures that could still exist somewhere beneath the landscape. Others have proposed connections with forgotten groups, hidden communities, or secret traditions preserving knowledge of sacred objects. These ideas remain unproven, but they continue to attract attention because the document itself appears so unusually specific. Perhaps the greatest mystery is why someone would create such a document on copper. Producing a metal scroll required considerable effort. Copper was expensive, difficult to prepare, and far less convenient than parchment. If the text was merely symbolic, why invest resources into engraving it onto a material designed to endure? If it recorded real locations, why has no treasure ever been definitively recovered? Some researchers believe the answer may lie in the turbulent world of the 1st century AD. The region experienced political conflict, religious tension, and dramatic changes that reshaped communities across Judea. In such uncertain times, hiding valuable objects and preserving records of their locations would have been a logical response. Whether the copper scroll reflects an actual emergency measure or a symbolic tradition remains uncertain. Today, the artifact continues to be studied using advanced imaging techniques and historical analysis. Each examination provides more information about its construction, language, and possible origins, yet the central mystery remains. The copper scroll is not simply a list of hidden objects. It is a glimpse into a world where memory, survival, wealth, and belief were deeply connected. Its engraved lines preserve the voice of someone who wanted something remembered, but whether that memory points to a real collection of treasures, a symbolic message, or a story that was never meant to be completed, remains an unanswered question. Somewhere between the words carved into copper and the landscapes they describe, the final chapter of the scroll may still be waiting to be discovered. From the engraved copper plates of Qumran, where words preserve the memory of possible treasures and forgotten intentions, our journey now moves toward another archaeological enigma, shaped not by writing, but by hundreds of silent stone objects scattered across a remote landscape. Here, the mystery rests within massive carved vessels whose purpose, creators, and meaning remain only partially understood. In the mist-covered hills and dense forests of northeastern India, particularly across the state of Assam and neighboring regions, archaeologists have encountered an unusual collection of enormous stone jars, unlike almost anything else found in South Asia. Standing in remote valleys and elevated clearings, these ancient containers vary in size and shape, some appearing as simple carved cylinders while others resemble carefully crafted vessels with wide openings and rounded bodies. Their presence across difficult terrain has transformed these landscapes into one of the region's most intriguing archaeological puzzles. Known as the Assam megalithic stone jars, these structures are found across several sites, including areas such as Dima Hasao, where hundreds of examples have been documented. Some jars are positioned individually, while others appear in clusters covering open fields and forested slopes. Made from local sandstone and other available rock types, many are extremely heavy, requiring significant effort to quarry, shape, and transport. Yet, despite their impressive size, their original purpose remains uncertain. Unlike temples, burial monuments, or settlements, the stone jars provide few obvious clues about their function. They contain no inscriptions explaining their creation and are not accompanied by extensive architectural remains that could clearly identify the communities responsible. Archaeological investigation has revealed their existence, but the story behind them remains incomplete. Research suggests that these jars are associated with ancient megalithic traditions that existed in the region for centuries. Some scholars believe they may date to sometime between the 2nd millennium BC and the early centuries AD, although precise dating remains difficult because many jars were discovered without clear archaeological layers or associated artifacts. Establishing their age and cultural connection continues to be one of the greatest challenges facing researchers. One of the leading interpretations connects the jars with funerary practices. Excavations at some locations in Assam and nearby regions have uncovered human remains, suggesting that certain stone jars may have been linked to burial rituals. They may have served as containers for secondary burials, where human remains were placed after an earlier stage of decomposition. Similar practices are known from other megalithic cultures throughout Asia, where stone monuments played important roles in honoring ancestors and maintaining connections between generations. However, not every jar fits neatly into this explanation. Some examples appear too large or isolated to be easily explained as burial containers. Others lack direct evidence of human remains, leaving open the possibility that they served additional purposes. Could they have been connected to ceremonial gatherings, ritual offerings, or social traditions that have disappeared from memory? The craftsmanship itself raises further questions. Creating these enormous vessels from solid stone required specialized knowledge and considerable labor. Ancient craftsmen would have needed to identify suitable rock sources, remove large sections of stone, and gradually shape them into functional forms using tools far less advanced than those available today. The precision varies between examples, suggesting that different communities may have created them using their own methods over long periods of time. The distribution of the jars adds another layer of complexity. They are not concentrated around a single settlement, but spread across remote landscapes, often in areas where transportation would have been challenging. Why were these locations chosen? Did they hold geographical or spiritual significance? Were the jars placed according to traditions passed down through generations? Local, oral histories provide valuable cultural perspectives, though they do not offer a complete explanation. Some communities in the region maintain stories connected to ancient peoples, rituals, and unusual stone structures, preserving memories that may reflect long-standing relationships with the landscape. However, separating historical information from later traditions remains a careful process for archaeologists. As research continues, more speculative interpretations have also appeared. Some writers have suggested that the Assam stone jars represent evidence of a previously unknown civilization with advanced stoneworking abilities. Others have compared them with megalithic traditions found in distant regions, proposing possible connections between ancient communities separated by thousands of kilometers. These ideas remain unconfirmed, as current archaeological evidence points toward local cultural development rather than the work of an unidentified outside group. Modern studies are beginning to provide new insights through excavation, mapping, and technological analysis. Researchers are documenting the locations of individual jars, examining their geological composition, and studying nearby archaeological remains in an effort to reconstruct the societies that created them. Each discovery adds another fragment to a story that remains incomplete. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of the Assam stone jars is their quiet presence. They do not dominate the landscape like pyramids or fortresses. Instead, they sit among forests and hills, blending with their surroundings while preserving traces of decisions made by people who lived centuries ago. Their creators understood stone, space, and tradition well enough to leave behind monuments that survived long after their original meaning faded. Standing beside these enormous vessels today, we are left with more questions than answers. Were they containers for the dead, symbols of community identity, or part of rituals whose details disappeared with time? The stones remain silent, but their existence suggests that the landscapes of Assam still hold chapters of human history waiting to be fully uncovered. From the silent stone vessels of Assam, where ancient communities transformed massive blocks of rock into objects whose purpose remains uncertain, our journey now moves across continents to another carved surface filled with symbols and patterns. Here, the mystery is not contained within the shape of the monument itself, but within the countless markings etched into its surface, designs created thousands of years ago that continue to challenge interpretation. In the rolling countryside of West Dunbartonshire, Scotland, near the foothills overlooking the River Clyde, lies one of Britain's most remarkable prehistoric rock carvings. Known as the Cochno stone, this large slab of sandstone contains hundreds of carved symbols covering its surface. Spiral patterns, circular designs, grooves, and geometric shapes spread across the stone like a forgotten language written into the landscape. The Cochno stone is not a towering monument or a massive structure. It is a single rock surface, measuring roughly 13 meters by 8 meters, yet its complexity has made it one of the most discussed examples of prehistoric rock art in Europe. Its carvings belong primarily to the tradition known as Atlantic or cup and ring rock art, which appeared across parts of Britain and Ireland during the Neolithic and Bronze Age periods, likely between around 4000 BC and 1000 BC. The most recognizable features are the cup marks, small, circular depressions carved into the stone, often surrounded by one or more rings. Some designs connect multiple circles through channels, creating patterns that appear carefully planned rather than random. Alongside these are spirals, lines, and more unusual markings whose original meaning has been lost. The greatest challenge surrounding the Cochno stone is not understanding how it was carved, but understanding why. Archaeologists generally believe these symbols were created by prehistoric communities who used rock art as part of their ceremonial or social traditions. Similar carvings appear across the British Isles, suggesting that these designs belong to a widespread symbolic system shared by different communities. However, because no written records survive from these societies, researchers can only study the patterns themselves and compare them with archaeological contexts. Some interpretations suggest that cup and ring carvings may have been connected to ritual activities, sacred landscapes, or communication between communities. The repeated use of circular forms has led some researchers to consider possible connections with ideas of cycles, movement, or natural processes. Others suggest that the markings may have represented territorial boundaries, ancestral traditions, or important locations within prehistoric landscapes. Yet, the Cochno stone presents additional questions because of its unusual concentration of symbols. Why was this particular stone chosen? Was the location itself significant? Or was the rock simply an available surface suitable for carving? Did different generations return to add new markings over centuries, gradually transforming the stone into a layered record of human activity? The surrounding landscape provides some clues. The area around the Cochno stone contains evidence of prehistoric settlement and activity, placing it within a region where ancient communities interacted with hills, rivers, and natural landmarks. For prehistoric societies, landscapes were not merely physical spaces. They often carried social and symbolic meaning. A prominent stone surface could have served as a meeting place, a ceremonial location, or a marker within a broader cultural landscape. In the 20th century, the Cochno stone gained even greater attention after archaeologist Ludovic Mann documented the carvings and added his own interpretations. Mann believed some of the patterns might contain astronomical or mathematical significance, suggesting that the stone represented a sophisticated understanding of the cosmos. His theories attracted interest but remain controversial, as later researchers have found limited evidence supporting many of his conclusions. To protect the carvings from damage, the stone was intentionally buried in 1965 by archaeologists. Covering the surface with soil was considered the best way to preserve the fragile carvings from erosion, weather, and human activity. Decades later, excavation projects carefully revealed portions of the stone again, allowing researchers to study the patterns using modern recording methods. The renewed investigations have provided detailed maps and digital documentation, helping separate ancient markings from later additions. Over the centuries, the stone accumulated graffiti and modern carvings, creating another layer of history on top of the prehistoric designs. As with many ancient symbols, more speculative ideas have emerged. Some have suggested that the Cochno stone represents a lost form of writing, an ancient map, or a record of advanced knowledge passed down from an unknown culture. Others have proposed connections with distant civilizations or forgotten traditions. These interpretations remain outside mainstream archaeology because there is no direct evidence confirming them. Yet they continue to attract attention because the patterns appear so deliberate and complex. Perhaps the most intriguing possibility is that the Cochno stone was never meant to be read in the way modern people expect. The symbols may not represent words or numbers at all, but rather a visual expression of beliefs, relationships, and experiences shared by communities thousands of years ago. Today, the stone remains a remarkable link to a distant world. Its carved spirals and circles preserve the creativity of people who left behind no written history, only marks carefully placed into rock. The meanings behind those symbols may have faded with time, but the patterns remain, quietly inviting us to consider what ideas, ceremonies, and memories were once preserved on this ancient surface. From the carved symbols of the Cochno stone, where prehistoric communities transformed a simple rock surface into a canvas of meaning, our journey now moves across the Atlantic to a landscape where stone was shaped into something far more imposing. Here, the mystery is not contained within patterns and markings, but within enormous human-like faces carved from volcanic rock, monuments whose scale and expression continue to raise questions about the society that created them. Along the Pacific coastal plain of Guatemala, near the town of La Democracia, lies the archaeological site of Monte Alto. Surrounded by fertile volcanic landscapes and towering mountains, this region was once home to one of the earliest complex societies of Mesoamerica. Among its most remarkable remains are massive stone sculptures depicting human heads and unusual rounded figures, some weighing several tons and displaying features unlike any other early tradition in the region. The most famous of these monuments are the colossal heads of Monte Alto. Carved from enormous volcanic boulders, these sculptures portray human faces with broad features, prominent cheeks, closed eyes, and carefully defined mouths. Unlike the later Olmec colossal heads of the Gulf Coast, which often show helmet-like features and distinctive expressions, the Monte Alto sculptures possess a different artistic style, reflecting the beliefs and traditions of an earlier cultural landscape. Archaeological evidence suggests that Monte Alto developed around 1800 BC, making it one of the oldest ceremonial centers in Mesoamerica. The site was associated with the so-called Monte Alto culture, a society that existed before the rise of many better-known Mesoamerican civilizations. Its people constructed platforms, plazas, and ceremonial spaces demonstrating organized communities capable of large-scale projects. Yet, the stone heads remain among the site's most intriguing features. The purpose of these enormous sculptures is not fully understood. Unlike written records from later civilizations, the people of Monte Alto left no texts explaining who the figures represented or why they were created. Archaeologists have therefore relied on the placement of the monuments, their artistic characteristics, and comparisons with other early Mesoamerican traditions to understand their possible meaning. One interpretation suggests that the heads represented ancestors, rulers, or important individuals whose memory was preserved through monumental sculpture. In many ancient societies, creating a permanent image of a respected figure served to reinforce social identity and connections between generations. The effort required to carve and transport such massive stones indicates that these monuments held significant cultural importance. Other researchers have proposed that the sculptures may have had religious or astronomical associations. Several Monte Alto monuments appear to have been positioned according to specific orientations, leading some scholars to explore possible connections with solar observations and ceremonial calendars. The ancient peoples of Mesoamerica developed sophisticated relationships with cycles of the sun, seasons, and celestial movements, and monumental architecture often reflected these interests. However, interpreting the exact role of the sculptures remains challenging. Some of the most unusual figures at Monte Alto are not human heads, but rounded stone forms with carved facial features. These have sometimes been described as potbellies because of their large rounded shapes and seated appearance. Similar sculptures appear in other parts of Mesoamerica, but their symbolism remains debated. Were they representations of ancestors, fertility symbols, ritual objects, or something else entirely? The craftsmanship itself adds another layer of fascination. Working with dense volcanic stone required specialized knowledge and considerable labor. Ancient artisans would have needed to select suitable rock sources, shape massive blocks with stone tools, and refine surfaces to create recognizable human features. The transportation of these heavy sculptures across the landscape would have required coordination among large groups of people. Over time, Monte Alto has attracted more speculative interpretations. Some writers have suggested that the unusual proportions and expressions of the sculptures indicate knowledge or influences from distant cultures. Others have proposed that the monuments preserve traditions far older than currently recognized. These ideas remain outside mainstream archaeology, as there is no clear evidence connecting Monte Alto with external civilizations or unknown builders. Still, the uniqueness of the sculptures continues to encourage discussion. Recent archaeological studies increasingly emphasize the importance of Monte Alto as an independent center of early Mesoamerican development. Rather than viewing the site only through comparisons with later cultures, researchers are examining how its own traditions developed and influenced surrounding regions. The sculptures may represent one of the earliest examples of monumental artistic expression in the Americas, created by a society whose achievements have only gradually come into focus. Standing before these enormous stone faces today, the experience is one of encountering a presence that has survived thousands of years. Their expressions remain fixed, their origins partially understood, and their original voices long silent. They reveal the ambition of a people capable of transforming raw volcanic stone into lasting symbols of identity and belief. Yet, the questions remain carved alongside the features of the monuments themselves. Who were these faces meant to represent? What ceremonies surrounded them? And how much of the meaning behind Monte Alto's massive stone heads still waits to be uncovered beneath the layers of time? From the massive stone heads of Monte Alto, where early Mesoamerican communities transformed volcanic rock into enduring symbols of identity and belief, our journey now returns to the ancient landscapes of the Near East. Here, the mystery is not found in towering sculptures or carved faces, but in a much quieter discovery, an early example of human innovation preserved within the remains of one of the world's oldest farming communities. In the fertile Jordan Valley, near the modern region of the Sea of Galilee, lies the archaeological site of Tel Tsaf. At first glance, the landscape appears like many other ancient settlements scattered throughout the Middle East. Layers of soil, fragments of pottery, traces of walls, and the remains of daily life preserved beneath the surface. Yet, among these ordinary discoveries, archaeologists uncovered something that challenged traditional views of early construction technology: a hardened material resembling concrete, created thousands of years before the widespread use of similar techniques in later civilizations. Tel Tsaf dates back to the Middle Chalcolithic period, approximately between 5,200 and 4,600 BC. During this era, communities across the region were undergoing major transformations. Farming had become firmly established, villages were growing larger, and people were developing new methods for storing resources, organizing labor, and interacting through trade networks. The settlement at Tel Tsaf provides remarkable evidence of this changing world. Excavations have revealed large mud brick buildings, storage facilities, ovens, pottery vessels, and agricultural remains. Unlike many earlier farming villages, Tel Tsaf appears to have been a place where surplus production and long-distance exchange played an important role. But among these discoveries, one feature attracted particular attention: a carefully prepared plaster-like floor made from a material that showed characteristics similar to early concrete. The material was not modern concrete in the way we understand it today. It did not contain the same ingredients or follow industrial production methods. Instead, researchers identified a mixture created by combining natural materials that were processed, shaped, and hardened to form a durable surface. This discovery suggests that the inhabitants of Tel Tsaf possessed a level of technical knowledge that was more advanced than previously assumed for communities of this period. The significance of this discovery lies not only in the material itself, but in what it reveals about human experimentation. For much of prehistory, people relied heavily on natural surfaces and simple construction methods. Floors were often made from compacted earth, stone, or layers of clay. Creating a hardened, artificial surface required understanding how different materials reacted when combined and exposed to heat or environmental conditions. It represented a deliberate attempt to improve the durability and function of living spaces. Why did the people of Tel Tsaf invest effort into creating such surfaces? One possibility is that the material was used for practical reasons. The settlement appears to have been involved in storing large quantities of agricultural goods, including grains and other resources. Durable floors would have helped protect storage areas from moisture, pests, and damage, making them valuable in a community where managing surplus food was becoming increasingly important. The discovery also reflects a broader transformation taking place throughout the ancient Near East. Around this period, some communities were moving beyond simple village life toward more complex forms of organization. Evidence from Tel Tsaf suggests specialized activities, craft production, and connections with distant regions. Archaeologists have discovered imported materials such as obsidian from Anatolia and other objects, indicating participation in extensive exchange networks. These findings raise important questions about how far early technological knowledge traveled. Was the development of this early concrete-like material an isolated innovation created by the inhabitants of Tel Tsaf? Or was it part of a wider tradition of experimentation shared among communities throughout the region? The answer remains uncertain, because similar discoveries from this period are rare, leaving researchers with only fragments of evidence. The settlement also challenges older assumptions about prehistoric societies. For many years, early farming communities were often viewed as small, relatively simple groups focused primarily on survival and agriculture. Discoveries at sites like Tel Tsaf reveal a more complex picture. These communities were capable of planning large structures, managing resources, participating in trade, and developing technology suited to their needs. Some more speculative interpretations have suggested that the construction techniques at Tel Tsaf represent evidence of forgotten technological knowledge far ahead of its time. Others have attempted to connect early materials like this with much later architectural achievements in the ancient world. However, archaeologists generally view the discovery as an example of gradual human innovation, rather than evidence of advanced, unknown civilizations. The true importance of Tel Tsaf lies in understanding how small developments can transform human history. A hardened floor may appear insignificant compared with pyramids, temples, or monumental structures. Yet innovations like these often represent the foundations upon which later achievements were built. The ability to manipulate materials, improve living spaces, and organize resources helped create the conditions for increasingly complex societies. Modern research continues to examine the remains of Tel Tsaf using advanced archaeological methods. Microscopic analysis, chemical studies, and comparisons with other ancient sites are helping researchers understand how the material was produced and what role it played within the settlement. Still, many aspects of the site remain open to interpretation. The people who lived at Tel Tsaf left behind traces of their daily activities, but they did not leave written explanations of their ideas or discoveries. We can identify the materials they used and the structures they built, yet the thoughts behind their innovations remain beyond direct observation. Standing among the remains of this ancient settlement, it becomes clear that technological progress did not begin suddenly with great empires or famous monuments. It emerged gradually, through countless experiments carried out by ordinary communities seeking better ways to adapt to their environment. The early concrete-like material of Tel Tsaf represents one such moment, a quiet achievement preserved through thousands of years. It reminds us that even the simplest discoveries can reveal unexpected chapters of human creativity, leaving us to wonder how many other innovations from the distant past are still waiting to be uncovered. From the early construction experiments of Tel Tsaf, where ancient communities transformed simple materials into durable foundations for their settlements, our exploration now moves deeper into the world of prehistoric symbolism. Here, the mystery is not found in architecture or engineering, but in small clay figures that carry an unusual appearance, objects shaped by human hands thousands of years ago that continue to raise questions about belief, identity, and imagination. Across the ancient plains of southern Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers created some of the earliest centers of settled life, archaeologists have uncovered a collection of figurines unlike almost any other from the prehistoric Near East. Dating primarily to the Ubaid period, roughly between 6,500 and 3,800 BC, these small clay objects depict human-like figures with elongated heads, narrow faces, and large, oval eyes. Their unusual appearance has made them among the most debated artifacts from the ancient world. Known as the Ubaid figurines, and sometimes described as lizard-headed or reptilian figures, these objects have been discovered at several archaeological sites across Mesopotamia, including settlements such as Tel al-Ubaid, Ur, Eridu, and other locations connected with the Ubaid cultural tradition. Made from fired clay, many of these figures represent standing or seated individuals, sometimes holding infants or carrying objects whose meanings remain uncertain. At first glance, their unusual features immediately capture attention. The elongated skulls, wide eyes, and slender bodies appear unlike realistic human portraits. To modern observers, they can seem almost unfamiliar, leading to decades of speculation about what these figures were intended to represent. However, archaeologists generally interpret them within the cultural context of the Ubaid period, rather than as literal depictions of non-human beings. The people of this era lived in agricultural communities that were developing new forms of social organization, religious practice, and artistic expression. Figurines were common throughout the ancient Near East and often served symbolic, ceremonial, or domestic purposes. The greatest challenge is understanding the specific role of these unusual figures. Were they representations of deities, ancestors, ritual participants, or perhaps symbolic images connected to fertility, birth, or protection? Some figurines show female characteristics, and several hold infants, which has led researchers to explore possible connections with fertility traditions and motherhood symbolism. In many early agricultural societies, fertility was closely linked with survival, abundance, and the continuation of the community. Representations of human figures may have reflected hopes for prosperity, family growth, and connection with spiritual forces believed to influence the natural world. Other examples appear more ambiguous. Their exaggerated features may have been intentional artistic choices rather than attempts at realistic representation. Ancient artists often modified human forms to emphasize certain qualities, such as status, power, spirituality, or transformation. Large eyes, unusual proportions, and distinctive body shapes appear in many ancient artistic traditions as ways of expressing ideas rather than physical appearance. The archaeological context provides additional clues. Many Ubaid figurines were found in domestic areas, temples, or locations associated with ritual activity. Their placement suggests that they were not simply decorative objects. They may have played roles in ceremonies, household traditions, or personal beliefs that connected everyday life with the spiritual world. Yet, the figurines continue to attract attention because their exact meaning remains unclear. Unlike later Mesopotamian civilizations, the Ubaid people left no written explanations describing their symbols or religious practices. Without texts, researchers must rely on the objects themselves, their locations, and comparisons with other ancient cultures to reconstruct possible meanings. This uncertainty has allowed more speculative interpretations to emerge. Some writers have suggested that the figures represent visitors from another world, ancient beings, or memories of a forgotten population with unusual physical characteristics. These ideas have gained popularity because of the figurines' distinctive appearance, but they are not supported by archaeological evidence. Mainstream research continues to view them as symbolic creations of prehistoric communities. Still, the fascination surrounding the Ubaid figurines raises an important question about how humans represent ideas they cannot easily explain. Throughout history, societies have created images of powerful beings, spirits, ancestors, and forces beyond ordinary experience. These representations often reflect the beliefs and concerns of the people who made them. The unfamiliar appearance of the Ubaid figures may tell us less about what their subjects looked like and more about how ancient communities imagined identity, transformation, and the relationship between humanity and the unknown. The Ubaid period itself was a time of significant change. Communities were becoming more organized, settlements were expanding, and cultural traditions were spreading across large areas of Mesopotamia. These figurines emerged from a world on the edge of major developments that would eventually lead to the rise of cities, writing systems, and complex civilizations. Seen from this perspective, the small clay figures are not simply unusual artifacts. They are evidence of a society exploring new forms of expression and creating symbols whose meanings were important enough to preserve. Thousands of years later, Their faces still look out from museum collections and archaeological archives, carrying expressions that remain difficult to interpret. Were they guardians, ancestors, spiritual symbols, or something else entirely? The answers may have disappeared with the people who shaped them, but the silent clay figures continue to preserve a glimpse into a world where imagination, belief, and reality were deeply connected. The mystery of the Ubaid figurines lies not only in their strange appearance, but in what they reveal about the human need to create symbols. Long before written language recorded the thoughts of ancient communities, objects like these became a way to communicate ideas that could not easily be expressed through words. A small piece of fired clay became a vessel for memory, belief, and imagination. The people of the Ubaid period lived during a crucial turning point in human history. Their villages were becoming more complex, their relationships with the environment were changing, and their understanding of society was evolving. These figurines emerged from a world where humans were beginning to organize their lives around permanent settlements, shared traditions, and increasingly sophisticated cultural practices. Although the exact purpose of the figures remains uncertain, their creation itself reveals something important. The makers invested time and skill into shaping objects that had meaning beyond their physical form. They carefully altered proportions, emphasized certain features, and produced images that were clearly different from ordinary representations of everyday people. This suggests that the unusual appearance was likely intentional. The large eyes and elongated forms may have represented qualities that were considered significant within Ubaid beliefs. In many ancient cultures, exaggerated physical characteristics were used to communicate ideas rather than describe reality. A larger eye could symbolize awareness or connection with the unseen world. A transformed body could represent a figure existing between human and spiritual realms. This pattern appears repeatedly throughout human history. Civilizations separated by thousands of years and vast distances created images of beings that were not ordinary humans. Whether representing gods, ancestors, mythical figures, or spiritual forces, these creations reflected humanity's attempt to understand experiences beyond the visible world. The Ubaid figurines therefore invite us to consider a deeper question. When ancient people created unfamiliar forms, were they trying to represent something they saw or something they believed? The answer may never be completely known. Archaeological discoveries can reveal where objects were found, how they were made, and when they were created, but the thoughts and emotions behind them are often more difficult to recover. The silent faces of these clay figures have survived, but the stories that once surrounded them have largely disappeared. Modern research continues to examine these artifacts through new methods, including material analysis, archaeological comparison, and studies of early Mesopotamian communities. Each discovery adds another piece to the puzzle, helping researchers understand how the Ubaid people viewed family, spirituality, identity, and the forces that shaped their world. Perhaps the greatest importance of these figurines is not that they provide a clear answer to an ancient mystery, but that they remind us how much remains unknown about the earliest chapters of civilization. They represent a moment when humans were beginning to create lasting symbols, transforming simple materials into objects capable of carrying ideas across thousands of years. The Ubaid figures remain silent witnesses from a forgotten age. Their unusual faces continue to challenge our assumptions and encourage us to look deeper into the beliefs of the people who created them. They are not merely pieces of ancient clay, they are fragments of human imagination preserved through time. And as we leave behind the mysterious figures of Mesopotamia, our journey continues toward another discovery from the ancient world, where stones, structures, and forgotten creations reveal another remarkable story of human ingenuity and the mysteries still waiting to be uncovered. From the endless salt plains of Salar de Uyuni, where natural forces have shaped a landscape that seems almost beyond imagination. Our journey now returns to a world where human hands deliberately transformed enormous stones into enduring monuments. Here, the mystery is not created by geological forces alone, but by the decisions of prehistoric communities who moved, shaped, and positioned massive blocks of stone with remarkable precision. In the rolling hills of southern Spain, surrounded by the dramatic landscapes of Andalusia, stand the dolmens of Antequera, some of Europe's most extraordinary megalithic monuments. Built thousands of years ago during the Neolithic and Copper Ages, these ancient stone structures are more than simple burial chambers. Their orientation, relationship with the surrounding landscape, and carefully chosen locations reveal a sophisticated understanding of space, nature, and symbolism that continues to fascinate archaeologists today. The site of Antequera contains three primary monuments: the Dolmen of Menga, the Dolmen of Vieira, and the Tholos of El Romero. Together, they represent different stages of prehistoric construction and provide rare insight into the beliefs and capabilities of communities that lived in the Iberian Peninsula long before written records existed. Among them, the Dolmen of Menga is perhaps the most remarkable. Built around the 4th millennium BC, Menga is composed of enormous stone slabs forming a long chamber covered by a massive earth mound. Some of the stones weigh more than 100 tons, making their transportation and placement an extraordinary achievement for prehistoric builders. The monument was not simply assembled, it was carefully designed, with its entrance, internal space, and relationship with the surrounding landscape, all appearing to follow deliberate choices. For centuries, these structures were interpreted primarily as ancient tombs. This explanation remains central to archaeological understanding, as many megalithic monuments across Europe served funerary purposes. They provided places where communities buried and honored their dead, creating physical connections between ancestors and the landscapes they inhabited. However, Antequera reveals something more complex. The monuments do not appear to be positioned randomly. Their orientation suggests a deep relationship with natural features surrounding the site, especially the nearby mountain known as Peña de los Enamorados. Rising dramatically from the plain, this distinctive limestone formation dominates the landscape and resembles a human profile when viewed from certain angles. The alignment between the Dolmen of Menga and Peña de los Enamorados has become one of the most fascinating aspects of the site. Unlike many prehistoric monuments that face the rising sun or follow astronomical patterns, Menga appears oriented toward this natural landmark. Archaeologists believe this connection may indicate that the mountain held important symbolic or spiritual significance for the people who built the monument. Why was this mountain chosen? Was it simply a striking feature visible from the settlement, or did it represent something deeper within the worldview of the communities who constructed Menga? The relationship between monument and landscape is increasingly recognized as an important aspect of prehistoric archaeology. Ancient communities did not always separate architecture from nature. Mountains, rivers, caves, and other geographic features often carried symbolic meaning and could become central elements in ritual practices. At Antequera, the landscape itself appears to have been part of the design. The Dolmen of Vieira, another major structure at the site, follows a more traditional east-facing orientation. Its long corridor leads toward the rising sun, allowing light to enter the chamber during specific times of the year. This connection between architecture and sunlight suggests that prehistoric builders carefully observed natural cycles and incorporated them into their monuments. The Tholos of El Romeral represents a later development, constructed using a different architectural technique known as a beehive-shaped false dome. Its circular chambers and carefully arranged stonework demonstrate the continued evolution of megalithic traditions in the region. Together, these monuments reveal that Antequera was not a single construction project, but part of a long, cultural tradition lasting many generations. The engineering required to create these structures was considerable. Quarrying enormous stones, transporting them across uneven terrain, and positioning them without modern machinery would have required cooperation, planning, and specialized knowledge. The builders needed to understand weight distribution, structural stability, and the properties of different types of stone. Yet the greatest mystery is not how they built the monuments, but why they built them in this particular way. The interior of Menga is especially unusual because its design creates a sense of enclosure and connection with the surrounding world. The massive stones form a protected space, but the alignment toward Peña de los Enamorados suggests that the builders were also looking outward, linking the monument to a larger environment. Some researchers have suggested that caves and mountains played important symbolic roles in prehistoric European beliefs. Natural formations were often associated with origins, ancestors, or connections between different realms of existence. If this interpretation is correct, the builders of Antequera may have viewed the mountain and the monument as parts of a single, sacred landscape. Other studies have examined whether the site contained astronomical knowledge. While some alignments appear significant, archaeologists remain cautious. Not every orientation reflects intentional astronomical planning, and distinguishing deliberate design from coincidence requires careful analysis. Still, the precision and consistency of the monuments continue to inspire discussion. More speculative interpretations have suggested that the alignments at Antequera reflect knowledge far beyond what is usually attributed to prehistoric communities. Some have proposed connections with lost traditions or forgotten civilizations capable of advanced planning. However, archaeological evidence does not support these claims. Instead, researchers generally view the monuments as remarkable achievements created through accumulated knowledge, social cooperation, and a deep understanding of the local environment. The true achievement of Antequera may be even more impressive because it does not require unexplained technology. It demonstrates what human communities were capable of achieving through organization, observation, and shared purpose thousands of years ago. Modern archaeological research has transformed our understanding of these monuments. Excavations, geological studies, and digital reconstruction techniques have revealed details about the materials used, the construction methods, and the changing role of the site over time. These discoveries continue to show that prehistoric societies were not simple or isolated, but capable of creating complex cultural landscapes. Perhaps the most intriguing aspect of Antequera is the way the monuments appear to communicate with their surroundings. They are not merely buildings placed upon the land. They are structures designed in conversation with mountains, sunlight, and natural formations. Standing inside the dolmen of Menga today, beneath enormous stones placed there thousands of years ago, the scale of the achievement becomes clear. The builders left no written explanation, no record of their intentions, and no direct account of the beliefs that guided their work. Only the stones remain, positioned exactly where they were meant to stand. The dolmens of Antequera continue to preserve a message from a distant age, one written not in words, but in alignment, architecture, and landscape. And as researchers continue to study these extraordinary monuments, one question remains at the center of the mystery. What deeper meaning did these ancient builders see in the connection between stone, earth, and the vast world surrounding them? The unanswered question surrounding Antequera is not only about construction, but about the way prehistoric people understood their place within the world. These monuments reveal a society that viewed the landscape as something more than a physical environment. Mountains, stone, light, and the movement of the seasons were not separate elements. They were connected parts of a larger reality that shaped human experience. The builders of Antikythera lived thousands of years before written history, yet their choices suggest careful observation and a sophisticated relationship with their surroundings. They selected specific locations, transported enormous stones, and created spaces that reflected both practical needs and symbolic intentions. Their monuments became permanent expressions of memory, identity, and connection. Across prehistoric Europe, megalithic structures often appear in places where natural features dominate the horizon. This pattern suggests that ancient communities were not simply searching for convenient locations. They were choosing landscapes that carried meaning. A mountain visible from a monument, the direction of sunlight entering a chamber, or the presence of a particular geological feature could all influence how a place was experienced and remembered. Antikythera stands out because it preserves this relationship with exceptional clarity. The monuments and the surrounding landscape appear to form a single design, where human architecture and natural formations exist together. The stones were shaped by people, but the meaning of the structures extended far beyond the stones themselves. Over thousands of years, civilizations have risen and disappeared, but places like Antikythera allow modern observers to glimpse the thoughts of communities that left behind no written records. Their tools may have been simple compared with modern technology, but their ability to organize, plan, and create shared visions was extraordinary. The study of these monuments continues to change our understanding of prehistoric societies. New research reveals that these communities possessed complex social structures, long-distance connections, and a remarkable ability to transform their environment. They were not merely surviving in the ancient world, they were actively shaping it. Perhaps the greatest mystery of Antikythera lies in the silence surrounding its creators. We can measure the stones, study the alignments, and reconstruct possible construction methods, but the inner meaning behind the monuments remains partly hidden. The people who built them left behind no written explanation of what they believed, what they feared, or what they hoped future generations would understand. Yet, the monuments themselves provide a powerful message. They show that humans have always searched for ways to connect with something greater than themselves. Whether through religion, memory, astronomy, or a deep respect for the natural world, the builders of Antikythera created a place where stone became a bridge between humanity and the landscape. Today, the dolmens of Antikythera remain as one of the clearest examples of prehistoric imagination and determination. They stand not as forgotten remnants of a distant age, but as reminders that ancient societies were capable of extraordinary achievements when united by a shared purpose. Leaving behind the massive stones of Andalusia, our journey now continues toward another remarkable discovery. Another place where ancient people transformed their environment in ways that still challenge our understanding of the distant past. Here, the mystery will move from monumental stone architecture to a hidden world where forgotten structures reveal another chapter in humanity's endless search for meaning. From the clay figures of the Ubaid world, where ancient communities express their beliefs through unusual forms and symbolic creations, our journey now moves to one of the most dramatic landscapes on Earth. Here, the mystery is not carved by human hands, but shaped by the immense forces of nature. On a vast white plain high in the Andes, enormous stone formations have drawn attention for their unusual appearance and the questions they raise about the geological history of one of the planet's most extraordinary environments. Far above sea level in southwestern Bolivia lies Salar de Uyuni, the largest salt flat in the world. Stretching across more than 10,000 square kilometers, this enormous expanse of white salt creates an almost surreal landscape where the horizon seems endless. During the rainy season, a thin layer of water transforms the surface into a perfect mirror, reflecting the sky so completely that the boundary between Earth and clouds appears to disappear. But beyond the famous beauty of Salar de Uyuni lies another story, one involving massive stone formations, unusual geological structures, and ongoing debates about how they came to exist. Among the many features found around the region are enormous basalt formations and circular stone structures that have attracted attention from explorers, researchers, and enthusiasts searching for explanations. Some of these formations appear as large, disc-like structures, while others resemble carefully arranged blocks of volcanic stone. Their scale and appearance have led some observers to question whether they are purely natural formations or evidence of ancient activity. The reality, however, is more complex. The Altiplano region of Bolivia is one of the most geologically active areas on Earth. Millions of years of volcanic activity, tectonic movement, erosion, and changing climates have shaped the landscape into what exists today. The Andes Mountains themselves are the result of enormous geological forces that continue to influence the region. Basalt, the material associated with many of these formations, is a volcanic rock created when lava cools and solidifies. Across the world, basalt can form dramatic structures, including columns, platforms, and large stone masses with surprisingly regular shapes. To ancient observers, and even to modern visitors unfamiliar with geological processes, such formations can appear almost deliberately constructed. Yet the fascination surrounding the stone structures of Salar de Uyuni comes from their unusual scale and isolation. How did such massive stone features appear in the middle of a landscape dominated by salt and desert terrain? Why do some formations seem to display geometric patterns? And how did the region transform from an ancient body of water into one of the most remarkable environments on Earth? To understand the mystery, we must first look into the history of the landscape itself. Millions of years ago, the Altiplano was not the dry, high plateau seen today. The region contained ancient lakes that expanded and disappeared through cycles of climate change. One of the most significant was Lake Minchin, followed by later bodies of water such as Lake Tauca. As these lakes gradually evaporated, they left behind enormous deposits of minerals, including the thick salt crust that now covers Salar de Uyuni. Beneath the surface lies a complex geological structure containing layers of salt, volcanic material, and sediments that preserve evidence of dramatic environmental changes. The landscape is not static. It is the result of countless transformations occurring over immense periods of time. The stone formations found around the region are part of this broader geological story. Volcanic activity from nearby mountain ranges contributed layers of hardened lava and basalt, while erosion slowly shaped exposed surfaces. Wind, temperature changes, and water movement continued to modify the appearance of these structures over thousands of years. However, the human relationship with Salar de Uyuni adds another dimension to the mystery. The region has been inhabited for thousands of years by indigenous communities, including Aymara and other Andean peoples. These societies developed sophisticated knowledge of the landscape, using its resources for survival, trade, and cultural practices. Salt was not merely a natural material, it was an important resource connected with daily life, economy, and tradition. Nearby archaeological sites reveal evidence of ancient settlements, ceremonial activity, and long-distance exchange networks. The Andes were never empty landscapes. They were places where humans adapted to extreme environments and developed complex relationships with mountains, lakes, and natural formations. This has led some researchers to consider whether certain unusual stone arrangements around the region may have had cultural significance. In many ancient societies, distinctive natural features became important landmarks, sacred locations, or gathering places. A dramatic rock formation could serve as a marker, a symbol, or a place connected with stories passed through generations. Yet, separating natural formations from human-made structures remains one of archaeology's greatest challenges. Across the world, there are countless examples of landscapes where natural geology resembles human construction. Regular shapes, circular patterns, and massive stones can appear artificial even when created entirely through natural processes. Determining the difference requires careful analysis, including geological studies, archaeological context, and evidence of human modification. Some more speculative theories surrounding unusual stone formations near Salar de Uyuni suggest the possibility of forgotten engineering projects or unknown ancient cultures. Others compare the formations with megalithic structures found in distant parts of the world, proposing connections between civilizations separated by vast oceans and thousands of years. These ideas remain outside accepted scientific interpretations because there is currently no reliable evidence showing that the basalt formations were created by an unknown advanced society. Instead, researchers generally view the region as an extraordinary example of natural geological processes combined with a rich human history. Still, the fascination remains understandable. The landscape of Salar de Uyuni has always inspired questions about time, transformation, and human perception. Standing on the salt flats, surrounded by a horizon that seems to stretch forever, it is easy to understand why unusual formations capture the imagination. The environment itself feels like a place where ordinary expectations no longer apply. Modern technology continues to reveal new information about the region. Satellite imaging, geological mapping, and advanced scientific analysis are allowing researchers to study the hidden layers beneath the surface. These methods have helped explain many aspects of the landscape, while also revealing how much remains unknown about its long geological history. The idea of giant stone disks in such an isolated environment raises another important question. Why are humans so drawn to unexplained structures and unusual formations? Perhaps it is because they remind us that the world is older, larger, and more complex than any single explanation can fully describe. A strange shape in the landscape may not always represent a forgotten civilization or lost technology, but it can still reveal something remarkable about the forces that shaped our planet. Salar de Uyuni is a place where geology, archaeology, and human imagination meet. Its salt-covered surface preserves traces of ancient environments, while its surrounding stones reflect the powerful forces that created the Andes themselves. Every formation tells a story, but some stories require patience, evidence, and time to understand. As researchers continue studying the region, the giant basalt formations and unusual stone structures remain part of a much larger conversation about nature's ability to create patterns that resemble human design. They stand as reminders that the Earth itself is a record of immense events, written not with ink, but with stone. And somewhere within this vast landscape of salt, volcanoes, and ancient geological layers, more clues may still remain, waiting to reveal what the changing world of Salar de Uyuni has preserved for those willing to search. The story of Salar de Uyuni is ultimately a story about perspective. What appears mysterious at first glance often becomes even more fascinating when viewed through the long timeline of the Earth itself. The immense salt plains, the volcanic stones, and the traces of ancient environments are not isolated wonders, but fragments of a much larger process that has been unfolding for millions of years. The formations scattered across the Altiplano remind us that nature can create structures of extraordinary complexity. Without intention or human planning, geological forces can produce shapes, patterns, and landscapes that challenge our understanding of what is possible. The same planet that created towering mountains and endless oceans also created silent stone monuments that appear almost designed. Yet, the human presence in this region adds another layer to its significance. For thousands of years, people have looked at these landscapes not only as places to survive, but as environments filled with meaning. Mountains, lakes, unusual rocks, and vast open spaces became connected with traditions, stories, and beliefs that helped communities understand their place within the world. The ancient peoples of the Andes were careful observers of their surroundings. Their knowledge of seasons, weather patterns, mineral resources, and natural cycles allowed them to thrive in one of the harshest environments on Earth. The landscape that may seem empty to modern visitors was, in reality, a living world filled with movement, memory, and cultural importance. Salar de Uyuni also demonstrates how much of Earth's history remains hidden beneath the surface. The salt crust that stretches across the plateau is only the final chapter of a much older story involving ancient lakes, volcanic eruptions, shifting climates, and the slow movement of continents. Every layer beneath the ground contains evidence of a planet constantly changing. As exploration continues, researchers are discovering new details about how this remarkable region formed and how humans interacted with it over time. Future studies may reveal more about ancient settlements, environmental changes, and the relationship between Andean societies and their dramatic surroundings. But perhaps the true mystery of Salar de Uyuni is not whether its stones were shaped by unknown hands. The deeper mystery is how a landscape created by natural forces can appear so familiar, so intentional, and so connected to the human imagination. The endless white horizon, the reflections of the sky, and the silent volcanic formations create a place where the boundary between the natural and the impossible seems to disappear. It is a reminder that reality itself can be more surprising than legend. Leaving behind the vast salt mirror of Bolivia, our journey now moves toward another ancient mystery, one where the evidence is not scattered across a geological landscape, but carefully preserved within the remains of a civilization that left behind symbols, structures, and unanswered questions carved into the passage of time. From the carefully aligned stones of Antequera, where prehistoric communities created monuments that merged architecture with the surrounding landscape, our journey now moves to one of the most remarkable underground complexes of the ancient world. Here, the mystery is not found in distant mountains or open landscapes, but deep within the desert plateau of Egypt, where enormous stone containers were carved with extraordinary precision and placed inside a vast subterranean sanctuary. Beneath the sands of Saqqara, near the ancient capital of Memphis, lies the Serapeum, a monumental underground complex built to house the sacred Apis bulls of ancient Egypt. Hidden beneath the desert plateau, this immense network of corridors and chambers contains some of the largest stone sarcophagi ever created. Carved from granite, quartzite, and other extremely hard materials, these massive boxes continue to raise questions about their construction, purpose, and the remarkable engineering abilities of the people who created them. The Serapeum was first brought to wider attention in the 19th century when French archaeologist Auguste Mariette discovered its entrance in 1851. Guided by ancient references and inscriptions, Mariette uncovered a long underground passage lined with enormous stone chambers. Inside were colossal granite and basalt containers, many weighing dozens of tons, designed to hold the remains of the sacred Apis bulls. The discovery revealed a fascinating aspect of ancient Egyptian religion. The Apis bull was not considered an ordinary animal. From early Egyptian history, certain bulls with specific physical characteristics were believed to embody the presence of the god Ptah, one of the most important deities associated with creation, craftsmanship, and the city of Memphis. During their lifetimes, these sacred animals were cared for in elaborate temple settings, receiving offerings and religious attention. After their deaths, they were preserved through complex rituals and placed within the underground galleries of the Serapeum. At first glance, the purpose of the complex appears clear. It was a sacred burial place created for revered animals. Yet, the enormous stone boxes themselves remain one of the most fascinating aspects of the site. Walking through the underground corridors of the Serapeum, visitors encounter massive rectangular containers that resemble monumental sarcophagi. Their surfaces are remarkably smooth, their corners precisely shaped, and their interiors carefully hollowed out. Some were carved from single blocks of granite transported from distant quarries, requiring extraordinary effort and coordination. The scale of these objects raises important questions about ancient Egyptian engineering. How were such massive stones extracted, transported, and positioned underground? How did ancient craftsmen achieve such precise surfaces using the tools available during the periods when many of these containers were created? Mainstream archaeology provides several explanations. Ancient Egyptian builders possessed advanced knowledge of quarrying, measurement, and stoneworking developed over centuries. They used copper tools, stone pounders, abrasives such as quartz sand, wooden sledges, ramps, and organized labor forces to manipulate large blocks of stone. The construction of pyramids, temples, and royal monuments demonstrates that Egyptian society had the ability to coordinate enormous projects. However, the Serapeum presents a unique challenge because of the material and precision involved. Many of the largest boxes were carved from hard stones such as granite, which originates from quarries hundreds of kilometers away in southern Egypt. Moving these enormous blocks from distant regions to Saqqara required extensive planning. They had to be extracted, transported along the Nile or overland routes, and then carefully placed within underground chambers. The process was not simply a matter of physical strength. It required knowledge of engineering principles, logistics, and craftsmanship passed down through generations. The construction history of the Serapeum also adds complexity to the mystery. The earliest evidence of Apis bull worship extends back thousands of years, but the underground galleries visible today were mainly expanded during later periods, especially under the New Kingdom and subsequent dynasties. Pharaohs and rulers continued developing the site for centuries, adding new burial chambers and maintaining the religious tradition. This means the Serapeum was not the creation of a single moment in history. It was a place that evolved over generations, reflecting changing beliefs and political circumstances. The stone boxes themselves also reveal differences between individual examples. Some contain inscriptions identifying specific Apis bulls, their dates, and the rulers associated with their burials. Others are undecorated, leaving fewer clues about their exact history. These variations suggest that different workshops, periods, and artistic traditions contributed to the development of the complex. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Serapeum is the contrast between the simplicity of its purpose and the complexity of its execution. The religious reason for the burials is understandable within the Egyptian worldview. Sacred animals represented divine presence and maintained a connection between humans and the gods. Honoring them through elaborate rituals was consistent with broader Egyptian beliefs about life, death, and the continuation of existence. But why create such enormous stone containers for animal remains? The answer may lie in the importance of the Apis cult itself. The death of a sacred bull was not treated as an ordinary event. It represented the transition of a divine manifestation from one earthly form to another. The burial ceremony became a major religious occasion requiring a setting that reflected the importance of the animal's spiritual role. The massive containers were therefore not merely practical burial vessels. They were monuments expressing devotion, power, and the relationship between earthly rulers and divine forces. Still, some details continue to invite debate. The precision of certain granite boxes has led some researchers and alternative historians to question whether ancient Egyptians possessed tools or techniques that are not fully understood today. They point to the smooth surfaces, sharp internal corners, and scale of the objects as evidence of advanced craftsmanship. Archaeologists generally explain these features through skilled labor, specialized tools, and the gradual refinement of Egyptian stoneworking traditions. Experimental archaeology has demonstrated that ancient craftsmen could achieve impressive results using methods available thousands of years ago, although the exact techniques used for every individual artifact remain uncertain. The difference between acknowledging ancient skill and assuming unknown technology is an important distinction. The Serapeum does not require explanations beyond human capability, but it does remind us that ancient societies were capable of achievements that can still surprise modern observers. The underground location of the Serapeum adds another layer to its atmosphere. Unlike the towering pyramids that dominate Egypt's landscape, the Serapeum exists almost entirely out of sight. Its corridors extend beneath the desert, creating a space where darkness, stone, and silence surround the remains of creatures once considered divine. The environment itself reflects the Egyptian fascination with transitions between worlds, the movement from life to death, from the visible world to the unseen. The complex also reveals the importance of Memphis as a religious center. For thousands of years, this region served as a major political and spiritual hub. The Serapeum was connected with the wider religious traditions of Memphis, particularly the worship of Ptah and the beliefs surrounding creation and divine order. Over time, however, the traditions surrounding the Apis bulls declined. As political power shifted and religious practices changed, the Serapeum eventually ceased to function as an active sanctuary. The underground chambers remained sealed, preserving evidence of a tradition that had once played a central role in Egyptian society. Today, researchers continue studying the site using modern archaeological methods. Analysis of inscriptions, materials, and construction techniques provides new insights into how the complex developed. Digital documentation is helping preserve details of the massive stone containers and the architecture surrounding them. Yet, the fascination of the Serapeum extends beyond its physical remains. The stone boxes represent a remarkable meeting point between faith and engineering. They show how religious beliefs could inspire enormous technological achievements, and how ancient societies invested extraordinary resources into honoring concepts that shaped their understanding of existence. Standing inside the galleries of the Serapeum, surrounded by walls carved deep into the desert rock, the scale of the achievement becomes difficult to ignore. These massive granite containers were created for animals, but they reveal something much larger about the people who built them: their organization, their beliefs, their craftsmanship, and their determination to preserve what they considered sacred. The legacy of the Serapeum does not end with the silent chambers beneath Saqqara. Instead, it opens a wider window into the way ancient civilizations transformed their deepest beliefs into physical monuments that could survive for thousands of years. The underground galleries remind us that the ancient world was not shaped only by rulers and wars, but also by traditions, rituals, and ideas that connected ordinary life with the divine. As the centuries passed, the memory of the Apis bulls slowly faded, and the voices of the priests who once performed ceremonies within these corridors disappeared. Yet, the stones remained. They became silent witnesses to a civilization that placed enormous importance on preserving connections between the human world and the forces they believed governed creation itself. The Serapeum also raises a broader question about ancient architecture. What motivates a society to dedicate such immense resources to a single purpose? Across the ancient world, from burial monuments to sacred temples, humans repeatedly created structures that exceeded simple practical needs. These places were designed not only to serve a function, but to express identity, belief, and a desire for permanence. In Egypt, stone was more than a building material. It represented endurance. While human lives were temporary, carefully shaped monuments could carry memories across generations. The massive granite containers of the Serapeum reflect this philosophy. They were created to protect something considered sacred, but they also preserve the skill and ambition of the craftsmen who shaped them. The mystery surrounding these underground chambers comes partly from their contrast with the world above. The desert surface appears endless and empty, yet beneath it exists a carefully engineered space filled with evidence of planning and precision. This hidden landscape reveals that ancient Egypt still holds many layers waiting to be understood. Modern technology continues to provide new ways of examining these ancient remains. Scientific analysis, digital mapping, and archaeological research allow investigators to study details that earlier explorers could never have recorded. Every measurement, inscription, and fragment contributes another piece to the story of the Serapeum and the people who created it. But perhaps the greatest lesson of this ancient sanctuary is not found in the size of its stones or the complexity of its construction. It is found in the human desire to give meaning to existence. The builders of the Serapeum lived thousands of years ago, yet their questions were remarkably familiar. They wondered about life, death, the relationship between humanity and the universe, and how beliefs could be preserved beyond a single lifetime. The silent corridors beneath Saqqara continue to hold these questions within their walls. They are not simply a collection of ancient chambers or enormous stone containers. They are a reminder that civilizations are remembered not only through what they conquered, but through what they valued enough to build. And as we leave the darkness of the Serapeum behind, our journey through the ancient world continues toward another extraordinary site, where forgotten landscapes, mysterious structures, and remarkable achievements reveal even more about the ingenuity of those who came before us.